Chapter 1831. Hiya! She dashed forward. The dragon dukedom of Doragonia's dragon dukedom roared with a pitch-black greatsword in her hand. She dashed forward violently as if she wanted to squeeze out all of her strength. In front of her, the only male elf user on the continent gazed at Leola and gently raised the holy sword in his hand. In the next moment, the silver holy sword and the pitch-black greatsword both turned into sword lights. Clank! The pure white and pitch-black sword lights collided with each other, creating crisp clanking noises. In an instant, sparks flew everywhere, and phosphorescent godly power rippled like waves of ripples from the elven devices that collided with each other. Hiya! Leola roared like a huge dragon and instantly suppressed Noah with the help of the dragon attribute elven magic to strengthen her body. Immediately after, the pitch-black greatsword turned into an endless stream of slashes like a storm, swinging in Noah's direction like a torrential storm. His vision was already covered by the saber lights and sword shadows. Noah's pitch-black and deep eyes were as calm as a lake without any ripples. He gently raised the holy sword in his hand again. Clank! 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 If Leola's sword was like a storm that could tear a person's body apart, then Noah's sword was just the opposite. It danced in the void casually like a gentle breeze. However, even so, the storm-like slashes were still deflected by the holy sword, which was like a gentle breeze brushing against one's face. The melodious sounds of swords and halberds continued to resound in the air, which was exceptionally intense. Clank! 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 The sounds of swords and halberds didn't stop. Leola moved closer to Noah with an overwhelming aura. She then slashed out a torrential storm of attacks. She was like a crazed rock cutter, mercilessly shattering all the rocks, debris, and bricks in her surroundings. In the face of such a violent combo, let alone a human, even if a dragon were to barge in, it would be instantly engulfed in the crazily dancing shadows of swords and sabers. Blood and internal organs would splatter, and its body would be smashed into pieces. However, Noah was in the middle of it all. Although Noah had been constantly retreating to avoid being overwhelmed by Leola's astonishing arm strength, he was still able to receive Leola's storm-like slashes every time he swung his sword. Clang 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 clang. Sparks flew as the two swords clashed. Huff, 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 huff. The whirling elven device stirred up howling winds. One advanced while the other retreated, one attacked while the other defended, and they displayed an extremely intense sword dance. Everywhere they passed, numerous cracks were slashed open on the ground, and it was like a typhoon had passed by, causing it to be extremely shocking. Luminaris held her breath at the sight of this. It had to be said that the intensity of the sword dance had exceeded Luminaris's imagination. Initially, apart from Liena Subble, Luminaris didn't take anyone seriously in this elven sword dance festival. Even though she knew that Noah had defeated Versilia and that Leola was the trump card of the Draconic Duchy of Draconic Kingdom, Luminaris didn't take them seriously and didn't treat them as formidable enemies. It wasn't that Luminaris looked down on Noah and Leola, but in Luminaris's heart, no matter how powerful Noah and Leola were, they couldn't be compared to the strongest sword dancer. Luminaris's goal was to defeat the strongest sword dancer. As such, Luminaris naturally wouldn't be too wary of the elven envoy whom she thought was inferior to Lien. She only took them seriously. Now, after witnessing the battle between Noah and Leola, Luminaris finally understood. Even if they couldn't be compared to Lien, they weren't existences that she could simply ignore. At the very least, the power that Leola displayed was enough to make Luminaris feel solemn. What made Luminaris feel even more solemn was Noah. Luminaris admitted that if she was in Leola's shoes, she would never be able to parry Leola's attacks so perfectly even if she didn't get flustered. She would never have been able to parry Leola's attacks so perfectly even if she didn't get flustered. However, Noah was standing in the middle of the stormy attacks like a rock cutter. Not only did he deflect all of Leola's attacks, but he also had a calm expression on his face as though it wasn't strenuous at all. Moreover, from the beginning to the end, Noah was only parrying and didn't attack at all. Thus, Luminaris immediately understood. He's going easy on me. Luminaris immediately denied this sentence as soon as it came out of her mouth. He's not going easy on me, Lien said calmly. If Noah had switched from defense to offense, the outcome would have been decided in an instant. If Noah was willing, the dragon lady might not even have the chance to attack and would be killed immediately. However, the dragon lady is a respectable elven envoy. Therefore, Noah probably wants her to retain some of her dignity, which is why he allowed the dragon lady to attack, right? Is that so? Luminaris said coldly. Isn't that going easy on her? He's just giving the opportunity to attack first to his opponent. It's not considered going easy on him. Once he switches from defense to offense, Noah will still decide the outcome of the battle in an instant. He's showing his opponent the greatest respect. Lien looked up and stared at Luminaris. I'll also give you the opportunity to attack first and decide the outcome of the battle in an instant. This is the respect I'm showing you in this Elven Sword Dance Festival. Is that so? Luminaris gripped the elven device in her hand tightly as the light in her eyes turned colder and colder. Then I'd like to see if you can kill me in an instant when you switch from defense to offense. As soon as she finished speaking, Luminalis also rushed towards Lotus like a storm. Clank! Following the sound of a collision that was louder than any of the previous ones, the storm-like battle finally came to a stop. Ha! 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 Holding the pitch-black greatsword tightly, Leola, who was holding it in front of her, still stared at Noah. Her chest was heaving up and down as she panted continuously. Obviously, the fierce attack just now had consumed a lot of the dragon lady's stamina. On the other hand, Noah pointed the sacred sword diagonally to the ground. Not only was his breathing not disordered, but his expression was still as calm as before. His performance gave Leola an unusual amount of pressure. At this moment, Leola felt that Noah was like a huge mountain. Not only was he majestic, but he also made her feel small just by standing there. This feeling made Leola tighten her grip on the sword bit by bit, and sweat began to drip down her delicate face. He's really as strong as a monster. A smile appeared on Leola's face as if she was trying to be brave. This is the strength of the elven envoy who can rival the strongest sword dancer? You're also very strong, Noah said sincerely. Among the elven envoys that I know, your strength is definitely in the top 5. You can be proud. Lien and Rubia were both extraordinary existences. One had the strength of the Dark Elven Monarch, while the other had the strength of the 5 Elven Monarchs. Naturally, they couldn't be defeated by a human Elven envoy. Grey and Vaz were known as the strongest Elven envoys on the continent. The ultimate sword skills that they developed were used by Noah and Lien, so they were naturally stronger than Leola. However, apart from these existences, Leola was definitely the strongest elven envoy that Noah had ever seen. Even Versilia might not be Leola's match. Of course, this was referring to Versilia before she had a large number of spell engravings. Therefore, I won't show you any mercy. Noah finally raised the sacred sword in his hand and pointed it at Leola. Next, it's my turn. At this moment, a chill ran down Leola's spine. Leola's pupils immediately shrank. Whing! In the next moment, dense divine power erupted from Noah's body and surged into the sacred sword in his hand. In the faint sound of the air being torn apart, the godly speed thrust transformed into a lightning-like attack and flashed in the air. Ultimate sword skill. Primary form purple lightning. The silver sacred sword was like a thunderbolt, and in less than a second, it arrived in front of Leola. Poochie! Leola only saw a blur in front of her, and then her chest was ruthlessly pierced through. Intense pain mercilessly assaulted Leola's spiritual sea. Chapter 1832. The battle ended in an instant. Lying on the ground, Leola clutched her chest. Her face showed a little pain, but more than that, she was satisfied. Noah stood in front of Leola with the silver holy sword in his hand. He looked down at the dragon princess and spoke helplessly. "How was it? Did I satisfy you?" "Of course." Leola's breathing was hurried and her face was pale. However, the satisfaction in her tone was clear. "Although the result is depressing, you showed me the peak of the sword dance. With this, I can move toward the peak." She wasn't obsessed with winning or losing, nor was she obsessed with the result. She only enjoyed the process of the battle. As soon as the battle ended, the first thing she thought about wasn't the result of the battle, but her future path. How should he put it? Even Noah began to admire the princess of Dragon Dukedom of Duraguna. Noah smiled and said when he saw the satisfied look on the other party's face, "If there's a chance in the future, you're welcome to challenge me." "Of course." Leola gazed at Noah. Even though she couldn't stand up and suffered a crushing defeat, her eyes were still filled with scorching battle intent. "From now on, you're my target." Looking at the scorching battle intent in Leola's eyes that didn't diminish at all and was even denser than before, Noah shrugged and welcomed her in a dignified manner. Shing! The silver holy sword emitted a dazzling radiance and gradually shrunk into the shape of a silver dagger. "Thank you for your hard work, Aster," Noah muttered softly. Then, he sheathed the silver dagger and looked at Leola. "All right, I have to take your magic stones." "Those are the spoils of war that you deserve," Leola said matter-of-factly. "You can take them as you wish." However, Leola's voice became weaker and weaker as if she had recalled something important. Her pale face gradually became rosy. Noah felt strange. "What's wrong with you?" Leola didn't answer. She maintained her blushing face and glared at Noah fiercely before closing her eyes. Hurry up and take them." Looking at Leola's blushing face and shameful words, Noah felt baffled. However, Noah still squatted down and searched Leola's body. However, after searching through every pocket of Leola's clothes, Noah couldn't find the magic stones. This time, Noah was stunned. Why isn't it? Could it be that she didn't bring it with her? No. If she didn't bring it with her, she would have been teleported back to the Grand Altar. Could it be that they were like the elven messengers of the Holy Roha Kingdom, who had set up a magic spell on their bodies that would transfer magic stones to their teammates if they were defeated? But Leola wasn't that kind of person. "What are you doing?" Leola's face was still red as she spoke with her eyes closed. Hurry up and take them." "The problem is that I can't find them," Noah said in bewilderment. "I've already searched through your pockets." I didn't put them in my pockets." Leola's voice became as soft as a mosquito's and her face became redder. I put them on my body." "Put them on your body." Noah was stunned at first. Then, he thought of a possibility and the corner of his mouth twitched. His gaze shifted stiffly to Leola's ample bosom. "Leola, don't tell me you hid the magic stones there. Is that why you're blushing so shyly?" This. Noah was speechless and helpless. "How am I supposed to take them? Are you going to take them or not?" Leola opened her eyes and glared at Noah with a blushing face. "If you're a man, you should be more straightforward." Upon hearing that, Noah was amused. "Be more straightforward, right? No problem." Since the girl didn't think there was a problem, what was there to be afraid of as a man? With that in mind, Noah reached out his hand. On the other side, the battle between Lotus and Luminalis had also come to an end. Just like Noah, Lotus only endured Luminalis attacks and went into a defensive stance, completely deflecting Luminalis attacks. Unlike Leola, Luminalis didn't just attack ferociously. Sometimes, she would widen the distance and cast elven magic on Lotus. However, in the face of Luminalis elven magic, Lotus also released her own magic sword technique. Death announcing dark lightning. A pitch-black bolt of lightning erupted from the pitch-black magic sword. It flashed through the air and headed straight for Luminaris. Luminalis didn't even have time to react before she was struck by the pitch-black lightning. Beep beep beep. The violent pitch-black electric current surged on Luminalis' body and continuously caused damage to her. Oh! Luminalis couldn't help but let out a sorrowful cry. When the pitch-black electric current dissipated from Luminalis' body, she fell to the ground with smoke rising from her body. The winner was revealed just like that. Damn it. Luminalis struggled a few times but couldn't stand up from the ground. She couldn't help but have a regretful expression on her face. Undoubtedly, I have an absolute advantage in terms of attributes, but I actually lost so miserably. 3 years ago, even though Lotus had won against Luminalis due to the fact that their attributes were against each other, it was still a tough battle. 3 years later, Luminalis was no longer able to give Lotus a hard fight. She was defeated by Lotus in one hit. The gap between them wasn't small. However, that was natural. 3 years ago, Lotus only learned the ultimate sword skill under Grey and Vartha's guidance for a year. As a result, she dominated the Elven Sword Dance Festival and obtained the title of the strongest sword dancer. Now, after 3 years, under continuous training, Lotus's sword dance technique had already reached a level that shocked even Noah. It was far from what it was 3 years ago. Therefore, even without using the power of the Dark Elf King, Lotus could still defeat Luminalis in one strike. Moreover, it was under the condition that their attributes countered each other. Even without the power of the Dark Elf King, Lotus' strength was already much stronger than the rest of the elves. It was estimated that even if Grey and Varth recovered the strength that they had when they were the strongest elves in the continent, they wouldn't be able to defeat Lotus, who didn't use the power of the Dark Elf King. Naturally, Luminalis wouldn't be able to defeat Lotus either. "You're already very strong," Lotus said to Luminalis. "However, I'm stronger than you." After saying that, Lotus squatted down and snatched the magic stone away from Luminalis, who was extremely unwilling to accept the outcome. Buzz! After a while, a teleportation magic array flashed under Luminalis and disappeared on the spot with her. Buzz! Almost at the same time, not far away, another magic array flashed into existence, letting out a clear and audible trembling sound. Lotus looked over and saw Leola being teleported back to the Grand Shrine by the magic array with a flushed face and disappeared into the air. As for Noah, he was holding a magic stone in his hand with an awkward expression, as if the magic stone was hot. Under such circumstances, even the atmosphere in the air had become a little strange, causing Lotus to frown and approach. "What's wrong?" "No. Nothing." Noah coughed dryly as if he had done something shameful. He pretended to be calm and put away the slightly warm magic stone in his hand. "Is it over on your side?" "It's over." Lotus looked at Noah suspiciously and then gave the 3 magic stones to Noah. "With this, you have 11 magic stones. Winning the championship is no longer a problem." Noah took the 3 magic stones from Lotus's hand and turned to look at her. "What are you going to do next?" "I'll stay in the sanctuary for the time being." Lotus looked straight at Noah. "I look forward to the best news you can bring." After saying that, a teleportation magic array suddenly flashed under Lotus and turned into a burst of light particles and disappeared on the spot. Noah quietly watched Lotus leave. After a while, he raised his head and looked at the sky. Next is the real show. Just like that, the end of the competition slowly arrived. Chapter 1833. Clank. A pure white flash appeared abruptly in the space, illuminating the entire space. In the flash of light, several figures slowly appeared. Together with the magic array, they were directly teleported into this room. Noah felt that his vision suddenly turned pure white, and then he appeared in this room. Taking a closer look, he found that this was a rather grand and luxurious room. How is it? Are we back? Seems like we're back. We should be back, right? While Noah was observing his surroundings, the voices of several young girls suddenly rang out beside him. Noah turned his head and looked to the side. He immediately saw his companions. The group of girls also noticed Noah's presence. Their eyes lit up, and they quickly approached him. What? What's the situation now? Claire asked nervously. We should have returned to the floating island in the holy region, right? That's right, we're back. Fiona looked around and seemed to confirm something. She nodded. I came here when I was still Witch G of the Divine Rites Court. This is the audience hall in the deepest part of the Great Sacrificial Hall. Usually, if someone wants to see the elf concubine and is allowed to do so, the elf concubine will summon them here. The audience hall of the elf concubine. Alice asked in surprise and doubt. Why were we teleported here? Yeah. Lindsley seemed to be surprised as well. Also, it seems like only our team was teleported here. Why is that? The reason. Isn't it easy to guess? Noah curled his lips and smiled. Only we were teleported here after the elven sword dance ritual ended. The other teams weren't teleported here. There should be only one reason, right? Hearing this, Claire, Lindsley, Fiona, and Alice became excited. That's right. Since only Noah's team was teleported to the audience hall of the elf concubine, there could only be one reason. Right at this moment, a voice sounded. Just as everyone thought, the only people who will be teleported here are the winners of the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Congratulations on your victory. Following this voice, a young girl slowly walked out from behind the curtain at the very front of the audience hall. It was a girl with waist-length black hair neatly combed into a braid. The young girl was wearing a bright red ceremonial dress. She seemed to be only 14 or 15 years old, but there was an indescribable majesty and nobility about her. It was enough to make ordinary people hold their breaths when facing this young girl. Although Noah's group did not hold their breaths, they were still shocked by the girl's appearance. That was because Noah and the others had seen them before. When the Elven Sword Dance Festival officially began and the rules and venue of the competition were announced, Noah and the others had seen this young girl among the 5 elven concubines who announced the oracle of the Elven King. That was right. This girl was Fairy Concubine. Moreover, she had inherited the position of Lubia Elstian, the elf concubine of Calamity. She was the Fire Elf concubine who served the Fire Elf King. Lexia Almenas. That was the young girl's name. Lexia. Fianna happily stepped forward. Senior Fianna. The Fire Elf concubine also happily stepped forward. The two girls hugged each other just like that, their charming faces full of happiness. This made Claire, Lindley, and Alice jump in fright again. Fianna. Claire nervously said in surprise. You know the Fire Elf concubine. Of course I know her. Fianna was still hugging Lexia, she even rubbed her cheeks. When I was still in the divine ceremonial courtyard, Lexia had not become the Fire Elf concubine yet. Back then, Lexia was my cute junior. Senior Fianna. Lexia seemed to be tickled by Fianna's rubbing and said embarrassedly. I'm not the child of that time anymore. Aw. Fianna suddenly laughed mischievously. In other words, Lexia has grown up. Then let me check. Don't do that. Lexia shyly struggled. At least don't do it here. Claire, Lindley, Alice, and the other girls broke out in cold sweat when they saw Viviana rubbing Lexia's body all over with a smirk on her face. Hurry. Hurry up and stop. Alice hurriedly stepped forward and stopped Fianna. Even if she was once a good friend, she is now the fire elf concubine. You are being disrespectful. That's right. Linley couldn't help but say. Please stop, it's not good for your heart. Although Fianna was the princess of a kingdom, she paled in comparison to the fire elf concubine. After all, the fire elf king was the ruler of the world, and the fire elf concubine was an existence that directly served the fire elf king. Not to mention the princess of a kingdom, even the emperors and kings of large kingdoms had to speak politely in front of the fire elf concubine. Otherwise, it was very likely that they would be punished. Even the king of a kingdom would be punished, let alone the princess of a kingdom. Therefore, the girls were not joking. It was really not good for the heart. Instead, it was Lexia herself who smiled at everyone. Please don't mind. Although she is the fire elf concubine, Senior Fianna is my friend. Since you are all Senior Fianna's friends, you are my friends. Please don't be so polite. After saying this, Lexia looked at Noah again, and the smile on her face began to stiffen. You are Sir Noah, right? I've heard so much about you. Noah was suddenly speechless. She just said not to be so polite, and now she was speaking to him in such a polite tone. What was going on? I'm sorry, I was rude. Lexia seemed to have realized that her words were inappropriate, and she repeatedly bowed to Noah. This is the first time I've spoken so closely with a man, so I feel a bit nervous. It's okay. Noah smiled bitterly. I can understand. Hee hee. Fianna snickered. Lexia is still as cute as before. Senior Fianna. Lexia raised her small fists and bashfully pounded Fianna's back, making Fianna laugh non-stop. From this scene, it could be seen that Fianna and Lexia's relationship was very good. After fooling around for a while, Lexia sorted out her mood and smiled calmly at Noah and the others, befitting her noble status as the fire elf concubine. All in all, congratulations on winning the Elven Sword Dance Festival. The news of your victory has probably become a hot topic, and it should be known by everyone in the continent in a few days, right? Hearing Lexia's words, everyone instantly looked at each other. We really won. Claire seemed to be in disbelief. Won the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Linley, Fianna, and Alice all looked uneasy as if they were afraid that someone would tell them that this was a joke. They looked very timid. Lexia only responded with a gentle smile. If you don't believe me, you can confirm how many magic stones you have received. Hearing this, everyone came to their senses. After we separated from Noah, we met 2 elven ambassadors from the Dragon Duchy of Duragonia and 3 from the Holy Caribou Kingdom. Alice took out the magic stones she had received. Because the 4 of us acted together, and each time we met an enemy, there were only 1 or 2 of us, so we easily won. We received 5 magic stones. Fianna collected the magic stones of the girls. Together with the magic stones from the 4 of us, we have a total of 9 magic stones. What about you? Linley looked at Noah. Did you get anything? Noah didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at the girls in astonishment, and then, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I didn't expect you to take care of the rest of the elven ambassadors. This way, our victory is indeed unshakable. Noah took out the remaining 11 magic stones, and under the shocked expressions of the girls, he suddenly smiled. After all, we defeated all the elven ambassadors of the other teams without any injuries. Chapter 1834. After separating from Noah, the 4 girls, Claire, Linsley, Fianna, and Alice, defeated the 2 elven users of the Dragon Emperor Knights and the 3 elven users of the Saint Knights. On the last day of the competition, Noah and Lotus dealt with the two elves of the Dragon Emperor Knights and the elves of the Saint Spirit Knights. In addition, the leader of the Dragon Emperor Knights, Leola, was defeated by Noah, and the leader of the Saint Knights, Luminalise, was defeated by Lotus. The teams from the Dragon Duchy of Doragonia and the Holy Korea Kingdom were all eliminated. In addition to the Dragon Emperor Knights of the Dragon Duchy of Doragonia and the Saint Knights of the Holy Korea Kingdom, there was also the Purgatory Apostles of the Alphys Empire. However, in the Purgatory Apostles, Lotus, Lubia, Moya, Lily, and Sarah's magic stones all fell into Noah's hands directly or indirectly. They were all eliminated. In other words, Noah, Claire, Linsley, Fianna, and Alice pocketed all the magic stones of the elven users of the other three teams in the finals. A total of 20 magic stones all fell into the hands of Noah's group almost miraculously. Moreover, it was under the condition that no one was injured. This fact made Claire, Fianna, Linley, and Alice look at each other in dismay, their faces full of disbelief. It can't be. Claire exclaimed in shock. Did we really defeat all our opponents without any casualties? Without a doubt, everyone in the continent has seen the whole process of the battle through the images sent back by the elves. You defeating all the elven users of the other three teams without any injuries has become a legend. Leisha turned her gaze and looked at Noah. Especially the battle between Lord Noah and Lord Liena Subble, as well as the battle between Lord Red Lotus of the Purgatory Apostle. Although the battlefield was covered in flames at that time, and the enslaved spirits couldn't get too close, the images transmitted back were a little blurry, but everyone saw the intensity of the sword dance between the three lords. It was really very exciting. Leisha's words caused the girls to be shocked once again. You met Lena Subble? Linley asked in an extremely uncertain voice. And you also obtained Lilian Ashubel's magic stone. Did you defeat the strongest sword dancer? I did defeat Lotus. Noah didn't hide and directly admitted. However, I didn't take the magic stone directly from Lotus. She gave it to me later. After Lord Noah defeated Lord Lotus, he didn't take the magic stone from Lord Lotus. Leisha seemed to be a little confused. On the day after the victor was decided, Lady Liena Subble suddenly assisted Lord Noah in collecting magic stones. In the end, she even gave the magic stones directly to Lord Noah. Everyone was puzzled. We just came to an agreement. Noah shrugged. Is this against the rules? No, the rules didn't say that elven envoys of different teams couldn't team up. Furthermore, Master Noah had already fought Master Liena Subble before that, and defeated the strongest sword dancer, so no one was dissatisfied, said Lexia. On the other hand, the fact that Lord Noah and Lord Liena Subble used the same sword dance technique has been made known to the world. Coupled with the fact that they worked together during the competition, everyone has begun to speculate about the relationship between the two of them. Noah was speechless. Sure enough, no matter which world one was in, gossip was always something that people would talk about enthusiastically. The sword dance that Lord Noah and Lord Lotus used was called the ultimate sword dance, right? Leisha smiled. Because the sword dance of the two of you is simply too wonderful and stunning, Lord Noah is now like Lord Liena Subble, admired by many elven envoys. Both of you are known as the elven envoys with the highest attainments in sword dance, and are now known as the black and white sword envoys. Ultimate sword users of black and white. Noah was stunned. Something like that actually happened? I see. Fianna said as if she had suddenly understood. Black refers to Lotus who used the pitch-black dark magic sword, and white refers to Noah who used the silver holy steel sword. Plus, the two of them used the ultimate sword dance, so they are called the ultimate sword users of black and white. In other words, you are really as famous as the strongest sword dancer. Alice said as if she was happy and envious. That's the highest honor. To be as famous as the strongest sword dancer, how many people want that? Claire nodded as if she had experienced it herself. From today onwards, Noah will be famous throughout the continent. But, that's to be expected, right? Lindsley said without thinking. Lotus' sword dance was so beautiful, but Noah's sword dance was also very handsome. Yes, yes. Claire, Fianna, and Alice almost subconsciously nodded in agreement. Then, they reacted together with Lindsley, their faces turning red. Just a little bit handsome. Lindsley added in a fluster. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. That's right. Claire, Fianna, and Alice all nodded with reddened faces. Just a little bit. Seeing the group of girls become arrogant, Noah didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Even if you want to hide something, you should use a better method, right? That way, I can see that you don't mean what you say, right? Of course, Noah didn't think he was that handsome. It was purely because he performed the absolute sword technique well. As the highest level of sword dance skills, the absolute sword skill was top-notch in terms of both practicality and aesthetics. Lotus became the strongest sword dancer with it. Now, Noah also used the absolute sword technique and became as famous as the strongest sword dancer. The absolute sword envoy of black and white. Noah murmured. Maybe it's an ill-fated relationship? The black came from the Vorpal sword, which penetrates the truth. White came from the demon slayer. In the past, the fairy device belonged to the Saintess and the Demon King respectively. Now, in the hands of Noah and Lotus, it became synonymous. It was indeed an ill-fated relationship. Of course, the Demon King Lotus and the Saintess Lubia had always been together. That might also be an ill-fated relationship. No matter what, we won. Fianna smiled happily. There's nothing more worth being happy about. That's right. Alice nodded with a rare look of joy on her face. This way, everyone's wish can come true. Hearing Fianna and Alice's words, Claire and Lindley's eyes turned red. Unlike Fianna and Alice, Claire and Lindley participated in the Elven Sword Dance Festival because they had a wish that absolutely could come true. Claire wanted to know the truth about her sister's betrayal. Lindley wanted to save her sister who was sealed in the ice spell. Now, their wish could finally come true. Both of them had the urge to cry. Seeing this scene, Noah's mood was very complicated. Noah could now help Claire fulfill her wish. But what kind of reaction would Claire have after knowing the truth? And Lindley was even worse. The Elven King had already gone crazy. Therefore, whether or not Lindley's wish could be realized was still a question. What's more, what Noah wanted to do next would eliminate their chance to make a wish. But even so, Noah still had to do it. When Noah's mood became extremely complicated, Laishia continued. In the evening, we'll hold a celebration for everyone. Nobles from all countries will be present. After the celebration, we'll be responsible for sending everyone to the Hall of Truth's sacrifice and making a wish in front of the Elven King. Please remember this process. After saying this, Laishia chatted with Fianna for a while before leaving Noah and the others alone. After Laishia left, before the girls were about to speak, Noah suddenly spoke. Everyone, I have something to tell you. Chapter 1835. The Elven King went mad. In the audience hall of the Great Sacrificial Hall, when Noah told the girls everything he knew, they were all dumbfounded. That Red Lotus's elder sister? Claire's delicate body began to tremble. An indescribably heavy atmosphere pervaded the entire audience hall. The expressions of the girls kept changing, their eyes filled with extreme shock and disbelief. It was as if their minds had been attacked, and they were stunned on the spot. I know it's hard for you to accept the truth immediately, and I know you won't easily believe such a ridiculous thing, but I have to tell you that it's all true. Noah sighed. It's not just me. Lotus also knows the truth, and even assassinated the Elven King 3 years ago. Her words are probably more convincing than mine. If you want to verify it with her, I can help you find her. Even that Lotus Asubble knows about this. Lindsley was truly shocked. Moreover, Lotus Asubble assassinated the Elven King 3 years ago. This isn't a joke, right? Alice's eyes were full of shock. The Elven King went mad, the Elven Mistress of Calamity appeared in this year's Elven Sword Dance Festival, and even the strongest sword dancer assassinated the Elven King. Is this all true? I can't imagine it. Fianna seemed to tremble, and her pretty face turned slightly pale. If it's really like this, then what about the witches of the Divine Ceremonial Court, who swore to serve the Elven King with everything we have? Obviously, the truth behind the Elf King's madness was a shock to everyone's mind. That was to be expected. If you told those believers that not only was God not merciful, but he was even mad and would destroy the world sooner or later, they might not believe you, and you might even be beaten up. To the people of this world, the Elven King, who governed the elements and dominated the world, was a godlike existence. Everyone was a believer of God. As such, how could Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice be willing to believe in such a ridiculous thing? They had been educated to believe in everything about the Elf King, so how could Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice be willing to believe in such a ridiculous thing? However, the girls also trusted Noah. They knew that Noah wouldn't joke about such a thing. Or rather, who would joke about such a thing? Not to mention, Noah also said that Lotus also knew about this matter and had even tried to assassinate the Elf King. The reason why the calamitous elf concubine betrayed the Elf King was because the Elf King had gone mad. How could they not be shocked? Then, where is sister now? Claire stretched out her trembling little hand, and tightly grabbed Noah's clothes. Her expression was no longer as stubborn as before. Instead, she looked like an abandoned little animal, and her eyes were full of fear. Is Big Sister still on this Saint floating island? I don't know. Noah shook his head. However, Lubia said that before we meet the Elven King and make a wish for the sword dance of the elves to end, she will wait and see. So, even if she is not on the floating island in the Holy Realm, she should be hiding nearby and observing, right? Sister is nearby. Claire bit her lips, and her pair of red eyes trembled violently. Noah could guess what Claire was thinking. This girl had always wanted to know the truth, just to prove that her sister wasn't an unforgivable sinner in everyone's eyes. Now that she knew that Lubia was nearby, Claire would definitely want to rush in front of her sister, right? Not only to know the truth, but also to see her sister. However, Claire didn't lose her mind. Although she had lost her cool, at least Claire knew that it was impossible to see her sister no matter how much she wanted to. Because, not to mention Claire, even Noah didn't know where Lubia was hiding. There was only one thing that could be confirmed. That was, Lubia must be by Noah's side, quietly waiting for Noah to take action. I chose to tell you everything, not to make you waver, but because I feel that this matter can't be hidden from you. Noah looked around at the girls. After all, after tonight's celebration, we will be able to go to the Hall of Truth to meet the Elven King as the winners of the Elven Sword Dance. At that time, I will make a move on the Elven King. I only told you the truth in order to not cause any chaos and unnecessary trouble. I hope you can understand. Make a move on the Elven King. Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice couldn't help but swallow their saliva. You want to assassinate the Elven King like Leanne Asubble 3 years ago? Fianna couldn't help but ask. Can you do that kind of thing? Yes. Yes. Alice couldn't help but say. We are only students. No matter how outstanding we are still humans. How can we fight against the rulers of this world? You You don't want to reconsider? Linley lost her calm and said shakily. That's too dangerous. It's not just dangerous. Claire's expression became extremely complicated. If we don't do it right, we might be seen as a sinner who betrayed the Elven King like sister. Even if the Elven King is angered once again, would that still be fine? Claire's words silenced the rest of the girls. Although they still found it hard to believe that the Elven King had gone crazy, even if it was true, Noah's actions only meant one thing. He would become the enemy of the world. This was the consequence of making a move on the Elven King. Noah only smiled faintly at this. 3 years ago, Leanne assassinated the Water Elven King and freed him. If the Elven King wanted to vent his anger, he could have done so 3 years ago, but he didn't. This time should be the same, right? At this point, Noah's eyes narrowed slightly. Moreover, I won't be like Leanne and only release one Elven King. If I can release all the Elven Kings, without the Elven King going crazy, the human world won't be threatened. Hearing this, the group of young girls looked at each other, not knowing what to say. Regardless of whether it was Claire, Linley, Fayanna, or Alice, although they all had prominent family backgrounds, in the end, they were only ordinary girls. Not to mention coming into contact with the darkness of this world, these girls usually didn't even come into contact with the opposite sex in order to maintain their purity. Now that they suddenly came into contact with such a heavy matter and the truth, how could they remain calm? However, there was one thing that the group of girls finally understood. The girls' wishes probably couldn't be realized. Fayanna and Alice, who didn't have any wishes, didn't think much of it. Claire's wish was to know the truth about her sister's betrayal, and this wish had now been realized. Only Linley sat weakly on the ground, her eyes red. Doesn't that mean there's no way to save Udia? Linley's sobbing words made Claire, Fayanna, and Alice feel sad. Noah was the only one who said it directly. That's not the case. After saying this, Noah took out his gift card and took out a piece of elven Oregon. Do you still remember the elves we met in the underground maze of the abandoned city? Noah raised the elven ore in front of Linley. That elven girl who lost her memories and power was actually the Water Elven King that Leanne released from the Hall of True Sacrifice 3 years ago. Isalia Shiva. Water Sprite King. Linley was shocked. Isalia Shiva. Claire, Fayanna, and Alice all sucked in a breath of cold air. If we can help the Water Elven King regain her power and memories, not only will it be helpful to me, it should also be helpful to your sister who was sealed in the ice spell by the Water Elven King. Noah looked at Fayanna. However, the Water Elven King's memories and power have been sealed. Fayanna, I want to ask you to help Isalia Shiva with the unsealing ceremony and undo the seal on her body. Me? Fayanna opened her mouth wide. Chapter 1836. As the winners of the Elven Sword Dance Festival, Noah, Claire, Linley, Fayanna, and Alice were all accommodated in the High Worship Hall, waiting for the celebration at night. After Lacia excused herself, she had the witches of the Divine Ceremonial Courtyard prepare rooms for Noah and the others. Thus, Noah and the others directly moved to the room assigned to Noah. However, at this moment, in the middle of this rather spacious room, there was a very complicated and mysterious magic array. Around the magic array, there were small altars. On each of the altars, there was a burning candle flame. And in the middle of the magic array, a young elven girl with water-like sky-blue waist-length hair was lying on the ground with a tranquil expression. Seeing the young elven girl lying on the ground, Claire, Linley, Fayanna, and Alice looked at each other in dismay. Hey, Noah. Fayanna couldn't help but ask. Is this child really the Water Elf Queen? How would I know? Noah said irresponsibly. Anyway, that's what Lotus said when she saw this child. The Elf Queen of Calamity also tried to kill her at the beginning. It wasn't easy for me to protect her. If you tell me that this child isn't the water elf queen, then even I will complain, right? Although that was what she said, Noah was basically certain that this young elven girl was the water elf queen. Not only because he had seen the water elf queen in the Hall of Truth and Lotus had promised to release her, but also because this young elven girl had mentioned that otherworld darkness more than once when her memory was stimulated in the abandoned city. That terrified look was still fresh in Noah's mind. If this young elven girl wasn't the water elf queen, even Noah wouldn't believe it. I know you don't believe it. Noah spread out his hands. In short, first use the unsealing ceremony to undo the seal on this child. When she recovers her memory, then the truth will be revealed. Or, is there a problem with the unsealing ceremony? There's no problem with the unsealing ceremony, but if you want to use the unsealing ceremony to undo the seal, you must know the real name of the unsealing target. Frianna said. If the name is fake, then no matter what, you can't undo the seal. Obviously, Frianna still didn't dare to believe it. In this regard, Noah didn't explain further and directly said. You can begin now. Okay. Frianna nodded helplessly. Then let's begin. After saying that, Frianna's expression became serious. That expression faintly revealed a noble temperament. However, that was the expression that a former fairy concubine candidate should have. Then, under everyone's gaze, Viviana slowly stepped forward and came to the back of the elf girl lying on the ground, facing Noah and the others. Then, Viviana closed her eyes and slowly opened her hand toward the elf girl lying in front of her. Thou, Isalia Shiva, is hereby liberated. The moment that clear voice sounded, Frianna's entire body fluctuated with dense divine power. Boom! The candlelight on the surrounding altars suddenly swelled like an explosion, igniting the altars one by one and slowly burning them. Clank! The magic array drawn on the ground began to bloom with dazzling light. The light was like a torrent, converging on the body of the elf queen lying in the center of the magic array. At this moment, the space around the elven girl suddenly trembled, causing her body to flash with a dazzling light. Ugh! The elf queen's tranquil expression suddenly distorted, revealing a painful expression. Seeing this scene, Claire, Linley, and Alice's group all trembled. It's moving. Alice cried out in panic. She moved. Stupid, idiot. Linley seemed to be startled by Alice's shout. Don't scare me. That's not a doll. Of course she can move. Claire complained. Alice. Don't make a fuss over nothing, okay? Saying this, Claire, Linley, and Alice all became visibly agitated due to their nervousness. After all, the one lying in front of them wasn't an ordinary elf, not even an ordinary humanoid elf, but a god who ruled the entire world, the Elf King. If a god appeared in front of them, no one would be able to remain calm, right? At this moment, the group of girls fell into extreme nervousness due to their emotions. Only Noah, who was staring at the elven girl's pained expression, didn't miss the elven girl's soft, mosquito-like murmurs. Darkness. Darkness. The elf queen's delicate body trembled as she murmured in a dreamlike voice. Darkness is devouring me. Hearing these murmurs clearly, Noah's eyes rippled slightly. The excited Claire, Linley, and Alice seemed to have finally heard the elven girl's murmur. They all held their breaths. Darkness. Claire murmured. Could it be the otherworldly darkness that Noah mentioned that would drive the Elf King crazy? This means. Alice began to feel uneasy. Is this child really the Elf King? The Elf King. Linley looked at the child she had met by chance in the underground maze with a complicated expression. I didn't expect this child to be the Elf King. Frianna also seemed to be shaken, but she displayed the qualities of an excellent witch of the divine ceremonial court. After a while, she regained her composure and continued to pray and bless with her eyes closed. Under such circumstances, the light of the magical ray drawn on the ground became more and more intense, and the surrounding altars burned even more fiercely. On the contrary, the Elf Queen's pained expression began to disappear little by little, and her expression returned to its original tranquility. However, everyone present had a feeling. Undoubtedly, it was exactly the same expression as before. But as the unsealing ceremony progressed, that tranquil expression made the Elf Queen emit an indescribable temperament. That temperament was ancient and tranquil, with an extraordinary feeling. Looking at that tranquil and tender face, everyone had a thought in their minds. The person in front of them was an incomparably honorable and noble existence. Clang! The rich light began to dissipate little by little. Phew! The surrounding altars had been burned to ashes, leaving only a pile of dust. Fianna slowly opened her eyes, looked at the peacefully sleeping Elf Queen, and murmured softly, "Yu Shen, please wake up." As soon as he finished speaking, everyone saw it clearly. The eyes of the Elf Queen lying on the ground trembled a few times, and then she gently opened them. Like an ordinary girl, the Elf Queen looked around with a somewhat dazed expression. Seeing this, Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice all looked as if they didn't know what to do, and focused their gazes on Noah. Noah shrugged, stepped forward, squatted down in front of the Elf Queen, and said so. "How do you feel?" "You." The Elf Queen stared blankly at Noah, and then seemed to have recovered, and murmured, "So that's how it is. Did I accept the unsealing ceremony?" "Miss Elf." Linley, who was hiding behind Noah, hesitated for a moment before asking tentatively, "Do you still remember me?" "I remember you." The Elf Queen nodded. "We met in the underground maze of the abandoned city." Is that so?" Linley let out a sigh of relief. "That's really great. But our goal is to let you recover all your memories." Noah stared at the Elf Queen, and asked, "So, have you recovered your memories?" "Don't worry." The Elf Queen slightly closed her eyes, and said faintly, "It's already recovered." After saying this, the Elf Queen gradually got up, and faced Noah's group. Her voice was like a clear drop of water falling into a jade plate, pleasing to the ear, and lightly reverberating in all directions. "I am the Elf Queen of Water Isalia Shiva." Chapter 1837. In the room, an indescribable silence pervaded the air. Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice were sitting around a table, but no one spoke. Their expressions showed that they wanted to say something, but didn't know what to say. They looked like they were in a dilemma. Noah was sitting opposite the group of girls. Beside Noah was the Elf Queen, whose real name was Isalia Shiva. Her real body was the water elemental that governed this world. She was also sitting upright. Her gaze swept across the group of girls. "Brave witches, thank you for helping me. Unfortunately, I can't give you my blessings right now. I can only ask for your understanding." Hearing Isalia's words, the group of girls waved their hands and shook their heads in fear. We didn't do anything," Claire said awkwardly. "It was Noah and Linsley who helped Madame Isalia escape. It was Fianna who helped Madame unseal. Alice and I didn't help at all." Yes. Alice lowered her head in embarrassment. "Therefore, we don't have the qualifications to receive the Elf Queen's thanks and blessings." "Please don't say that." I also didn't help at all," Linsley said dejectedly. "It was Noah who helped Miss Elf. Madame Isalia come out of the underground maze. I only watched from the side. What I did was also insignificant," Fianna hurriedly said. "I was only in charge of the unsealing ceremony. There are many people in the mystic ritual courtyard who can perform the ceremony. I just happened to help a little." Clearly, in front of Isalia, the group of girls still felt quite nervous. It couldn't be helped. Who told the person sitting there to be the Water Elf Queen? The Elf Queen usually stayed in the Hall of Sacrifice, silently managing the entire world. Even if there was something, she would give orders through the elf concubines who served her directly. Humans simply couldn't meet the Elf Queen directly. The only people who could meet the Elf Queen directly were the elf envoys who won the elf sword dance ceremony. Sitting at the same table and chatting with the Elf King like this was something that had never happened before. Thus, how could the girls not feel nervous and terrified? Of course, the girls would no longer doubt Isalia's identity. After all, the unsealing ceremony was a ritual magic that required the elf's true name to undo the seal. Since the ritual worked on Isalia, then the name Isalia Shiva was undoubtedly the real name of the elf girl in front of him. Throughout both the human world and the elemental elf world, there was only one being with this name. That was the Water Spirit King. He was the one who controlled the water element and stood at the top of the world. While the young ladies were panicking, Isalia said, "Don't worry, I'm not going to give you a chance. You don't have to be so cautious. Although I'm the Elven King, I'm just a clone right now. I'm not the main body that governs this world." Doppelganger. Claire, Linley, Fianna, Alice, and the other girls were slightly stunned. A doppelganger. Noah turned to look at Isalia. "What's going on?" "To be more specific, the state of my existence is still incomplete," Isalia said. "Although my memories have been restored, I still feel a little scattered. Almost all of my power is left in the main body. The power that this body can use is too weak." Is that so?" The four girls, Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice, seemed to be a little confused. However, Noah understood what was going on. Lotus once said that 3 years ago, in the Hall of Sacrifice, she only destroyed the crazed personality of the Water Spirit King and released the original personality of the Water Spirit King. In other words, Lotus's target had always been the Elf King's personality. The Water Spirit King's personality that was released by Lotus formed this doppelganger. It was separated from its power and in a state of amnesia, it reincarnated in the underground maze of the abandoned city. Therefore, the Isalia in front of him was only a doppelganger. She only recovered her memories and her power was left in the main body. The portion that could be used was relatively small. However, even so, Noah's sensing ability could still detect a deep divine power from Isalia's body. That divine power energy was probably not weaker than that of an ordinary highest elf. After all, she was the Elf King. Even if the remaining power was pitifully little, she was still much stronger than the average elf. As for her memories, Isalia also said that although she had recovered them, there were still scattered parts. Immediately, Noah asked, "Then do you still remember what happened before you reincarnated in the underground maze?" "I don't remember very clearly." Isalia frowned slightly and said in a very uncertain tone, "I only vaguely remember that 3 years ago, in the Hall of Sacrifice, someone rescued me from being imprisoned in the darkness, and let me be free." This sentence made the group of girls hold their breaths. "Lady Isalia," Linley said with a trembling voice. "Did the Elf Kings really go crazy? Although it's not something to be proud of, unfortunately, it's the truth." Isalia was silent for a moment and then sighed. "It's not just me. The rest of the Elf Kings have been swallowed by the darkness and have completely fallen into a state of madness. At present, it seems that they have stopped their activities because of my liberation. Otherwise, not to mention the elemental elf world, even the human world would be affected by the crazy Elf Kings. Disasters would constantly emerge and human residences would be destroyed one by one." How could it be?" Alice was extremely incredulous. Even the Elf Kings can't do anything about the darkness." Fianna felt a little cold. "Is it because of this that Sister betrayed the Elf Kings?" Claire bit her lips tighter and tighter. For a moment, the atmosphere in the air became heavy. No one thought that Asalia was an alarmist. The elf kings brought great disasters to the human world. It had happened more than a few times in history. Storms, earthquakes, floods, volcanic eruptions. These great natural disasters, in this world, were almost all caused by something that offended the elf kings and caused the elf kings to be angry. Therefore, if the elf kings really went crazy and brought the disasters mentioned above to the human world one after another, the consequences, just thinking about it, made the girls shudder. If it's only a disaster level, then it's still okay. Asalia closed her eyes. If we elf kings continue to be eroded by the darkness of the other world, we will eventually destroy the world with our own hands, whether it's the elemental elf world or the human world. The cruel reality made the faces of the group of girls turn slightly pale. If that were to happen, not to mention the elves, even the humans would be heading towards the end of the world, right? Facing the disaster of the entire world, the 4 human elves were really too insignificant. So small that Claire, Linley, Fayanna, and Alice couldn't even breathe. At this time, only one voice was still indifferent. Don't talk about the destruction of the world. The world is stronger than you think. Even if it's the elf kings, how could it be so easy to destroy the world? That one sentence made all the girls present, including Asalia, stunned. Without giving the girls a chance to react, Noah turned his eyes and looked at Asalia. After tonight's celebration, we will go to the Hall of True Sacrifice to make a wish. At that time, I will liberate the rest of the elf kings. The girls trembled. Even Asalia couldn't help but look at Noah and say so. Can you do it? Don't worry. Noah curled his lips and smiled. As long as the opponent isn't a human, or doesn't have a deep relationship with humans, then no matter how powerful the elf kings are, there won't be any problems. No matter who heard Noah's words, they would think that he was arrogant. If the elf kings were so easy to deal with, then why would they govern the elements and support the existence of the world? However, it had to be said that Noah's words made everyone's hearts surge with courage. Asalia looked at Noah and nodded after a while. At that time, I will also go with you. Noah nodded. Chapter 1838. As a result, time began to pass slowly, and gradually, dusk arrived. Not long after, the celebration for the winners of the Elven Sword Dance Festival would begin. At that time, the various nobles from various countries in the human realm would gather at the banquet to bless the winners. That was the custom after every Elven Sword Dance Festival. Of course, although it was said to be a blessing, it was actually just a verbal blessing without any actual effect. However, at that time, the 5 elven concubines who directly served the 5 elven kings would also be present to provide the elven king and the winners of the Elven Sword Dance Festival with sacred music, praying for the elven king to continue protecting the humans and to bless the winners of the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Of course, the people who were busy with these matters didn't know. No matter how much they prayed for the Elven King's protection, if this continued, the world would sooner or later be destroyed by the Elven King's hands. As the saying goes, sometimes, ignorance was a blessing. At least, the people didn't have to worry about the unwarranted end of the world. They could still happily prepare for the banquet and enjoy the last moment of the Elven Sword Dance Festival. As one of the winners, Noah only needed to wait for the banquet to begin before making his grand entrance. That would be enough. Unfortunately, Noah didn't have the slightest interest in this so-called celebration. What Noah really wanted to do could only be done after the celebration ended. Staying in his room, Noah changed into his formal attire while holding the silver dagger and platinum dagger that were placed on the bedside table. Although it's troublesome, I still have to show my face at the banquet. Unfortunately, I can't bring weapons to the banquet. Noah spoke to the 2 daggers in his hands. Aster, Athena, I'll temporarily keep you in the gift card. As soon as he finished speaking, Aster and Athena's voices sounded in Noah's mind at the same time. I hope Master can quickly take me out. I don't like the space in the card. Aster, I don't mind. With your current strength, it will only be a loss without me. Sooner or later, you will need me. Athena, Noah didn't know whether to laugh or cry at the two completely different answers. Immediately after, Noah materialized the gift card. After keeping the Demon Slayer and Heavenly Sword into the gift card, he cancelled the materialization of the gift card. In the absence of the Gate of Babylon, the convenience of the gift card will be revealed. The function of the gift card was almost the same as the Gate of Babylon, which was a treasure trove. The difference was that the gift card could not be used like the Gate of Babylon, which could open the entrance of the treasury at any time and place, and use the weapons in the treasury as throwing props. However, the gift card was not inferior in terms of its function as a treasury. After all, the space in the gift card was also unlimited. Although it could only store gifts and daily necessities, it was much more convenient for storing items than carrying them around. As for the gift card itself, it could be instantiated or cancelled at any time. The way to carry the gift card differed from person to person. Some people would choose to put the gift card in a safe place and summon it and send it back at any time. Some people would choose to vaporize the gift card and merge it into the space. Even if it was somewhere else, it could still be materialized at any time. Noah's way of carrying the gift card was to merge it into his body. After all, Noah often needed to travel between different worlds. If he used the two methods mentioned above, he would not be able to summon and materialize it through the world's barrier. Therefore, merging it into his body was undoubtedly a good method. After putting away the elven device and cancelling the gift card and merging it into his body, Noah looked at the sky. It was dusk. The celebration would be held at night. There was still plenty of time. There's still some time. I'll go check on that silly girl. After saying this, Noah walked out of the room and headed in another direction. Because they were all winners of the Elven Sword Dance Festival, the distance between Noah's room and the other girl's room was not too far. Although the area of the Great Sacrificial Hall was quite large, Noah only took 30 seconds of slow walking to reach the door of his destination. Looking at the door in front of him, Noah reached out his hand. But before he could knock on the door, a voice came from inside the door. Sister. Congratulations on winning. Thank you, Milleryu. Lynn Silei, congratulations on winning. Thank you, Mila. Sob sob sob, it's great that Milady won. Don't cry, Carol. It's embarrassing. Upon hearing the voice coming from the room, Noah couldn't help but laugh. He didn't knock on the door and just said, "Come in." "Lindsley, I'm coming in." Suddenly, the sound in the room disappeared. Noah. Noah. Lindsley's voice changed. Wait. Wait. However, before Lindsley could say anything, Noah had already opened the door and barged in. The next moment, Noah saw a scene that made Noah's eyes light up. He saw that in the middle of Lindsley's room, a real milady was standing there. She wasn't wearing her usual Elven Academy uniform. Instead, she was wearing a navy blue evening gown. Her dazzling light blonde hair was tied up. She seemed to have put on some light makeup on her delicate face, making her lovable face even more gorgeous and moving. As for her pink lips, she seemed to have applied some lipstick, giving her lips a rose-like color, which made her look quite charming. Such a well-dressed milady suddenly entered Noah's eyes, making Noah stunned. Really? Really? Lindsley called out shyly. Didn't I tell you to wait? Why? Noah walked in, praising as he walked. Doesn't it look good? But, I was going to wait until the banquet started to show you. Lindsley puffed up her cheeks as if she was throwing a tantrum. Then there won't be any surprises. What are you talking about? Noah praised. I'm already surprised enough, really. Is that so? Lindsley was a little embarrassed, turning her head away. Hee hee. Carol snickered at the side. Milady really wants Mr. Noah to see this outfit the most. Carol. Lindsley's face was red as she hammered Carol's back. A petite girl next to Carol trotted over and threw herself into Noah's arms. Brother Noah. Her small head buried directly into Noah's abdomen, almost knocking Noah over. Milady. Lindsley said angrily. You can't do this kind of unladylike behavior. However, Milady completely ignored her sister. She raised her head and smiled at Noah like a flower. I watched all of Brother Noah's matches. It was really amazing. Brother's sword dance was really, really cool. Really? Noah smiled and patted Milady's head. Did you like it? I did, Milady said bluntly. And Mira liked it too. Just as she finished speaking, the back of her collar was grabbed by Mira, who suddenly appeared behind her and lifted her up. Congratulations on winning, Noah. Mira ignored the struggling Milady, and a rare smile appeared on her pretty face. Your sword dance was really amazing. You even defeated the strongest sword dancer and received the same honor as Liena Subble. It's really amazing. The absolute sword envoy of Black and White, this title will soon be known throughout the continent. Carol said with a smile. Mr. Noah will soon have a lot of fans. Like the strongest sword dancer, he will become the idol of all the elves on the continent. And, brother also helped sister win. Milady's smile became even brighter. This way, Sister Eudia will be able to come out of the cursed ice. Lindsley's expression instantly froze. The atmosphere became uncomfortable. Chapter 1839. In fact, Noah was also helpless. It wasn't strange for Lindley to have such a reaction. It was because in the end, Lindley's younger sister who was sealed in the cursed ice was still unable to be rescued. Lindley's second sister had made some mistakes when she was sacrificing herself to the Water Fairy King. She had incurred the wrath of the Water Fairy King, which was why she had been sealed in cursed ice. Therefore, Noah originally thought that as long as the seal on Isalia's body was broken, as the instigator, Isalia, as the Water Sprite King, shouldn't mind helping Lindley to break the cursed ice on Yusha's body. However, Noah's plan was wrong. There were two things that went wrong. Firstly, Isalia was currently only a clone, and most of her power remained on the side of the main body, so she couldn't break the curse on Yusha. Secondly, the cursed ice on Yusha's body wasn't simple. My memories are still somewhat scattered, but if that witch G was really sealed in the cursed ice because she made some mistakes during the sacrifice, then it couldn't have been done by me. I wouldn't be angry over a simple sacrifice, so that was probably what I did when I was in a state of madness. This was what Isalia told Noah to Lindley after knowing about Lindley's younger sister. In other words, the person who sealed Yusha in the cursed ice, even if it was Isalia, wasn't her original intention, but her rampage during a state of madness. If I still have my power now, then it shouldn't be difficult to break the curse. Unfortunately, I can't do it now. I can only wait until I return to my main body and see what happens. Noah still remembered how disappointed Lindley's face was when Isalia said this. But that was to be expected. In order to break the curse on her younger sister, Lindley didn't hesitate to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival with a strong determination. It wasn't easy for her to obtain victory and make a wish to save her younger sister, but in the end, she received such bad news. Fortunately, it wasn't that there was no way, but it couldn't be realized at the moment. As a result, Lindley could only swallow this bitterness. However, Milleryu didn't know about this. This child must have been waiting for her eldest sister to rescue her second sister from the eternal ice seal, right? Under such circumstances, Lindley simply couldn't explain it to her youngest sister. The fact that the Elf King had gone mad could not be publicized. But even if Lynn Silei told Mireia that there was no way to save Yudia for the time being, Mireia would definitely be very disappointed even if she could understand. As an elder sister, Linley usually looked like she cared a lot about her face, but deep down, she was indeed a gentle and virtuous girl. Linley probably didn't want to see her younger sister's disappointed look, so she didn't know how to explain this matter. Noah looked at Mireia and rescued her from Myra's hands, placing her on the ground. "Don't worry." Noah squatted down and reached out his hand to pat Malaja's head. "Lindsay Lay will definitely save your second sister." "An." Malayu nodded heavily, her little face brimming with happiness. On the other hand, Linley's expression became extremely complicated. "Eldest miss." Carol noticed Linley's expression and asked curiously, "What's wrong?" Linley didn't seem to know how to answer Carol's question and fell silent for a moment. This made Carol worried instead. Even Milayu blinked her eyes and moved forward in confusion. "Sister. What's wrong?" Before Milayu could reach Linley, Mira stepped forward and held her hand. "Linley should have something important to discuss with Noah. Let's go out first and not disturb them." Mira seemed to have noticed something. Although she was very young, only 13 years old, Mira was appointed as the leader of the Lipa division by the Russell Bell Duchy. Her mind was much better than the average person of her age. Sensing that Noah and Linley seemed to be hiding something, Mira very considerately covered for the two of them. "Is that so?" Milayu didn't seem to suspect anything and nodded repeatedly. "Then we'll go out first." "Yes." Carol took Milayu's other hand and winked mischievously at Noah. "We'll go out first and not disturb Mr. Noah and eldest miss relationship. This trashy maid who even needs her master to take care of her meals and sleep." Misunderstood, Mira only glanced at Noah and nodded at Noah. Then, Mira, Carol, and Milayu walked out of Linley's room while laughing and chatting. The entire room returned to silence. Noah and Linley could only watch the three girls leave. For a moment, they didn't say anything, causing the silent atmosphere to become somewhat uncomfortable. After a while, Linley spoke with a complicated expression. "I don't know how to tell Milayu about Yudia." "I know." Noah nodded without any surprise. "If it were me, seeing my sister so happy and looking forward to it, I wouldn't have the heart to disappoint her." What should I do?" Linley's eyes began to fill with tears. "Even Lady Iselia can't break the cursed ice, then what can we do to save Yudia? Iselia just hasn't recovered her strength yet. It's not impossible to save your sister." Noah turned his head and looked at Linley. "When everything is over, your sister will naturally be rescued from the cursed ice." "Everything is over. How long do we have to wait?" Linley said with some sadness. "Even the Elven King can't deal with that otherworldly darkness. Even if Lady Iselia recovers her strength, can she resist the erosion of the otherworldly darkness and end everything? That's something I need to consider." Noah smiled indifferently. "You just need to quietly wait for the good news." "Wait?" Linley was a little anxious. "But I've already waited." Before she could finish her sentence, Lynn Silei couldn't speak anymore. Because Noah suddenly stretched out a finger and covered Linley's rosy lips. While Linley was still in a daze, Noah looked directly at the girl in front of him. His eyes were like gemstones, and his dark pupils seemed to be able to suck people in, shining like the stars in the sky. Looking at Noah like this, Linley couldn't help but be a little absent-minded. Immediately, Noah opened his mouth. "Do you still remember what happened in the kitchen when we returned to the academy?" Noah's words made Linley come back to her senses, and her pretty face turned red. Not only did she feel embarrassed for looking at Noah's intoxicated past, but she also felt ashamed when she recalled what happened at that time. How could Linley forget what happened at that time? Because that was the only time in the life of this rich young miss being kissed by the opposite sex. That was Linley's first kiss. Moreover, the significance of kisses to elves and elven envoys was equally extraordinary. Kissing is the most sacred contract and ritual. Noah smiled slightly, and his finger gently rubbed Linley's seductive lips. At that time, I made a contract with you that I would definitely win the Elven Sword Dance Festival and save your sister. Now, the victory of the Elven Sword Dance Festival has been obtained, and the only thing left is to save your sister. Noah looked at Linley, and said word by word. At that time, I will abide by the contract. After tonight, I will let everything end, so leave your sister to me. Noah's words made Linley's gaze unable to leave Noah's face. Linley's pretty face was slightly red, and in the end, she only said this sentence. Can I trust you? Hearing this, Noah shrugged. Why don't you let me swear the oath again? After speaking, Noah held Linley's little hand, and gently kissed the back of her hand. Your sister will definitely be saved, trust me. Linley's cheeks became even redder. However, that delicate and pretty face was like a blooming flower, and a beautiful smile appeared on it. Chapter 1840. Night gradually arrived. With the arrival of the night, the nobles from the various countries of the continent began to appear one by one in the hall of the Great Sacrificial Hall. It was different from the previous competitions. At this moment, the hall of the Great Sacrificial Hall wasn't decorated to be as lively and solemn as a festival. Instead, it was decorated to be like a ball. On the ceiling, the chandelier made of elven ore emitted a gentle light. The surrounding walls were covered with luxurious hanging curtains. The floor was covered with a red carpet that people couldn't bear to step on. Long tables were placed in every corner of the hall, with plates of dishes and bottles of fine wine placed on them. The atmosphere was completely different from the previous lively atmosphere. However, with the appearance of the nobles one by one, the scene gradually became more lively. Everyone was happily discussing the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Even though there weren't any vulgar people present and the discussion wasn't that intense, one could more or less understand the emotions of the nobles who were dressed in formal attire and had impassioned expressions. There was only one topic that everyone was discussing. I didn't think that the Osea Empire would win this year's Elven Sword Dance Festival. When I heard that the strongest sword dancer didn't represent the Osea Empire, I thought that the Osea Empire wouldn't be able to win this time. In the end, the Osea Empire still won. Should I say, as expected of the strongest country on the continent that is on par with the Holy Taija Kingdom? Including this year's Elven Sword Dance Festival, the Elven Sword Dance Festival had been held 4 times in the past 30 years. The first time was 24 years ago and the winner was the 15-year-old Grey Vass. The second time was 15 years ago and the winner was an elven envoy from the Holy Taija Kingdom. The third time was 3 years ago and the winner was Lotus who represented the Osea Empire. The fourth time was this year and the winners were Noah, Claire, Linley, Fayanna, and Alice. In other words, including this year's Elven Sword Dance Festival, the Osea Empire had won 3 times in the past 30 years. However, that didn't mean that the Osea Empire was amazing. What good luck, Osea Empire. Exactly. No matter if it's the strongest sword dancer or that male elf, strictly speaking, they're not from the Audisia Empire. But both of them represented the Ordesian Empire in the Elven Sword Dance Festival and even won. If it wasn't for the Dusk Witch holding the fort, I'm afraid the kingdom of Odisia would be finished. Not to mention, the lost elf concubine of the Odisia Empire's royal family is also part of the winning team. Previously, we were abandoned by the royal family of the Odisia Empire, but this time, we won a beautiful victory. I'm afraid the royal family won't look good, right? That's why I said that the Odisia Empire was just lucky. How ironic. That was how others saw the Austrian Empire's victory. Of course, there was some jealousy in it, but the content of the topic was not without reason. No matter what, Noah and Lotus weren't from the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They were just representing the Austro-Hungarian Empire. In other words, the Austro-Hungarian Empire's 2 victories in the Elven Sword Dance Festival were only because they had external help. Moreover, it was not wrong to say that they relied on the Dusk Witch to hold the fort. After all, both Noah and Lotus had participated in the Elven Sword Dance Festival because of Gray and Vaz. If it wasn't for Gray and Vaz, Noah and Lotus wouldn't have represented the Austro-Hungarian Empire in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. On top of that, Princess Faena had been demoted to a lost elven concubine, and was even abandoned by the royal family. This time, Faena had obtained victory in the Elven Sword Dance Festival, giving the royal family of the kingdom a resounding slap in the face. In the eyes of others, the kingdom of 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 the kingdom. Therefore, in this victory celebration, most of the guests were criticizing the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Of course, no one had any opinions about the winner. Under such circumstances, Noah and Lindsley arrived at the entrance of the celebration. Ahem. Lindsley coughed deliberately and casually put her hand on Noah's arm. Noah was slightly startled. He turned his head and glanced at Lindsley, but he only saw Lindsley looking forward as if she had done nothing. However, Noah didn't miss the blush on Lindsley's pretty face. Therefore, Noah couldn't help but laugh in his heart. He brought the cute girl who was holding his arm and walked into the celebration. Their appearance immediately attracted everyone's attention. Look, the winner's team is here. That's the only male elf user on the continent. Is that the daughter of the Lorenfrost family next to him? What about the white sword user of the black and white sword users? Other than the strongest sword dancer, there's actually an elf user with such powerful sword dance skills. This is really unexpected. Should we go over and say hello? But that's a male, although it's a little scary. Isn't his sword dance very cool? Yeah. I want to say hello to him. How should I do that? You ask me, I don't know. If I knew, I would have already gone over. The young ladies of the royal family and aristocratic families were whispering to each other. They looked at Noah with fear as usual, but there was also a longing and reverence that had not been there in the past. Just like what Carol had said. Using the same sword dance as the strongest sword dancer, Noah's status in everyone's hearts rose steadily, and he had many fans. Back then, Lotus had captured the hearts of all the elf users with her gorgeous and wonderful sword dance. Now, Noah had displayed his skills in the Elf Sword Dance Festival and even won. Naturally, those innocent ladies had a whole new level of respect for him. However, Noah did not pay attention to those ladies who were talking about him. Instead, he looked around the venue. The hall was not only filled with nobles from various countries, but also the contestants of the Elf Sword Dance Festival. Whether it was the preliminaries or the finals, all the elf users who attended the Elf Sword Dance Festival seemed to have participated in this celebration. Because, after the celebration, the Elf Sword Dance Festival would officially come to an end. Therefore, those contestants who did not attend the dance and the festival before also went on stage and would return to their countries in a few days. Among them, Noah also saw many familiar faces. However, he could not find the person he was looking for. Linley seemed to know who Noah was looking for and could not help but speak. Are you looking for Lady Lotus Asubble? Before the competition ended, Lotus said that she would temporarily stay on the floating island until Noah went to the Hall of True Sacrifice to see the Elf King. Therefore, Noah also wondered if he could see Lotus here. Unfortunately, Lotus still did not come. Lotus was not the only one who did not come. The members of the Purgatory Apostles, who represented the Alphys Empire to attend the Elf Sword Dance Festival, also did not come. As expected, those people won't come, right? Noah shrugged. Other than Lotus, almost everyone else can't be seen in the light. We have no choice but to appear. Linley pursed her lips. After a while, when the elf concubines are done with the sacrifice, we have to go to the Hall of True Sacrifice to see the Elf King. As he said that, Noah clearly felt it. Linley's hand that was still in his arm seemed to be trembling slightly. Was it nervousness? Or fear? Noah did not know. However, Noah would not be surprised. Because, next, everyone would not be meeting the Elf King who could fulfill everyone's wishes, but a group of madmen who would sooner or later destroy the world. Whether it was nervousness or fear, it was human nature. Noah could only gently hold Linley's little hand and said so. Don't worry, Isalia will be there. Even if she has lost most of her power, it should not be a problem to ensure your safety. Before Linley could answer, another voice sounded behind Noah. Are you in any trouble? Chapter 1841. The sudden voice startled both Noah and Linley. They immediately turned around and looked behind them. In the next moment, both Linley and Noah were completely stunned. Behind Noah and Linley, a gorgeously dressed young lady was standing there. It was a beautiful young lady in a purple evening gown. The evening gown on the young lady was the type that exposed her slender shoulders and had some embellishments in the front. Her voluptuous upper body and beautiful figure were perfectly accentuated. Many of the male nobles in the hall couldn't help but turn their gazes over with some amazement in their eyes. However, Noah wasn't stunned because of the young lady's beauty. In Noah's impression, the young lady in front of him was radiant with a valiant and battle-hardened side. She wasn't like the refined young lady of a noble family who displayed an incomparably gentle side. The newcomer was Her Highness the Dragon Dukedom of Doragonia Leola. You. Noah said almost subconsciously. Why are you dressed like this? Is it strange for me to dress like this? Leola's beautiful pair of brows furrowed slightly. Since it's a ball, isn't it normal to wear an evening gown? That's true. Noah scratched his cheeks and laughed bitterly. It's just that I didn't expect you to wear an evening gown. I thought you would hate to dress like this. For a knight and warrior like Leola who followed her battle instincts, in Noah's opinion, even if she was allowed to wear an evening gown, she would definitely refuse to wear it with the reason of, it's inconvenient to move around and won't do any good in battle. Forget it. Therefore, Leola's valiant appearance really surprised Noah. Meanwhile, Leola's brows furrowed deeper and deeper as she spoke expressionlessly. I know that this dress doesn't suit me. It's normal for you to feel strange. No, you're mistaken. Noah expressed his thoughts frankly. It looks pretty good on you. Remember to wear it often in the future. Wah. Leola's expressionless appearance disappeared without a trace. Her beautiful face couldn't help but blush. Don't think that you can make me happy with your flowery words. I won't fall for it. Although that was what she said, Leola's behavior didn't seem like she could remain calm. Noah looked at Leola with interest, but in the next second, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in the soft flesh of his waist. Humph. Lynn Siley snorted coldly and turned her head away. Her delicate face was filled with hatred that anyone could see. Noah could only bitterly touch his soft flesh that had been pinched so hard that it hurt. Could it be that this girl also thinks that I'm just using flowery words to deceive this innocent little girl? Even the heavens could take pity on. Moreover, if he didn't say that, he would be embarrassed himself. After all, during the Elven Sword Dance Festival, Noah had taken advantage of Leola in order to obtain the magical stones on her body after the battle was decided. Therefore, he should at least say a few nice words, right? Thinking of this, Noah couldn't help but glance at Leola's ample bosom before quickly shifting his gaze away. He had to admit that this Dragon Duchess of the Dragon Duchy of Laguna was really something. How did I reach my hand out so calmly at that time? She didn't seem to be that calm. Just as Noah was bitterly touching his waist, Leola finally came to her senses. She coughed dryly and looked at Noah. I think I will remember the sword dance with you for the rest of my life. Now that you are on par with the strongest sword dancer, I don't know if I will have the chance to spar with you in the future. So, allow me to bring up an old matter. Bring up an old matter. Noah raised his brows. Are you referring to the matter we talked about previously? That's right. Leola nodded. Let me ask you one more time. Do you want to come to the Dragon Duchy of Laguna? Leola's words made Noah's expression turn strange. I am not proposing. Looking at Noah's strange expression, Leola seemed to have recalled something important. She blushed and glared at Noah. Although I can't deny that the Dragon King will let us marry in order to give birth to better offspring, it isn't absolute. There are many outstanding Magus concubines in the Dragon Duchy of Laguna. They definitely won't disappoint you. Many Magus concubines. Won't disappoint me. Noah couldn't help but ask. Why do you sound like a pimp? Pimp. Leola was slightly taken aback, and asked in confusion. What's a pimp? Noah's mouth twitched, and he sighed. No, it's nothing. I feel like you've said something rude. Leola knitted her brows again, but she didn't continue to dwell on it. Be it as a spirit envoy or as a man, in my opinion, you are extremely outstanding. Therefore, I sincerely hope that you can come to our Dragon Duchy of Laguna. If possible, I hope you can give me good news. As Leola spoke, she stared at Noah from the beginning to the end. Her attitude was still the same as before. She was very open and aboveboard, making it hard for Noah to feel disgusted by her. At that moment, Linley finally reacted to the situation. Wait. Linley couldn't help but take a step forward and yell. What do you mean by a proposal? When these words came out of Lindsay Lay's mouth, the whole place suddenly went silent. The nobles who were conversing in the surroundings stared at her in bewilderment. After a few moments of silence, they burst into an uproar. Proposal? Is there a proposal over there? Someone is proposing to Sword Emissary by Jew of the Black and White Sword Emissaries? Could it be that young lady? Isn't that the Princess of Dragon Duchy of Laguna? The Princess of Dragon Duchy of Laguna proposed to Sword Emissary by Jew. I see. Dragon Duchy of Laguna intends to use a marriage alliance to obtain the only male spirit envoy on the continent who is on par with the strongest sword dancer. That's too cunning. Yeah. I didn't expect there to be such a method. Why don't we give it a try? Perhaps we can poach Sword Emissary by Jew. The entire ballroom instantly became noisy. In this situation, Noah felt as though he had swallowed a fly and couldn't utter a single word. Linley realized that she had messed up and covered her mouth immediately. As for Leola, who had been reduced to being the person who proposed to Noah, her pretty face alternated between green and white. In the end, it was completely replaced by a blush of red. Under the shame and anger, Leola screamed without hesitation. It's not a proposal. I'm only interested in his genes. This sentence echoed clearly in the air. The originally noisy ballroom instantly quieted down. That was because everyone was dumbfounded. Even Linley was stunned. She turned her head stiffly and looked at Noah. Genes. You guys actually have such a relationship? Noah covered his face as if he couldn't bear to look at it. He was completely speechless. Leola seemed to have realized what she had said. With a bang, her pretty face turned red as if it had exploded. In the next second, tears welled up in the corner of Leola's eyes. I'll be back. After saying this, Leola lifted her skirt as if she was running away in tears. In an instant, she disappeared without a trace. Noah subconsciously extended a hand in the direction of Leola, as if he wanted to hold her back. One of his hands was suspended in the air. He didn't know whether to raise it or put it down. In the end, he laughed as if he was torturing himself. Forget it, I didn't really plan to go to the Dragon Duchy of Doragonia to spread my genes anyway. However, it was obvious that others didn't think so. What is going on? Linley looked at Noah with tears in her eyes. Explain it to me clearly. Explain. Would that work? Looking at the strange looks and expressions of the people around him, Noah looked up at the sky and sighed. Chapter 1842. After Linley and Leola's messing around, the atmosphere in the ballroom became a little strange. When Claire, Fianna, and Alice all dressed up and put on their gorgeous evening gowns, the strange atmosphere finally calmed down a little. However, Noah could clearly feel that the surrounding nobles were looking at him with completely different gazes. Perhaps they were inspired by Leola's marriage proposal, and the nobles from various countries had the idea of using marriage to rope in Noah. If they could rope in an elven envoy that was on par with the strongest sword dancer, it would be a great thing even for a country, let alone a noble. Moreover, Noah was a male elven envoy. He could definitely marry the outstanding witch G and give birth to even more outstanding offspring. Just this alone was enough to attract the nobles. Of course, this was also inspired by Leola's genes are important speech. Thus, Noah could only feel that the surrounding nobles, whether male or female, were looking at him with burning gazes. Those burning gazes made Noah feel goosebumps all over his body. Fortunately, because Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice were by his side, the nobles didn't directly come up to propose marriage. Otherwise, Noah felt that he would definitely be like in the world of Fairy's Tale, when he solved the giant dragon's invasion and became the first of the 10 Saint Magi. Wouldn't he welcome an even more spectacular marriage proposal? Just like that, time slowly passed by. Not long after, in the depths of the great sacrificial hall, a fire began to appear around an altar that was enshrined with tributes to the Elven King. Under the illumination of the bonfire, 5 elven maidens gradually appeared and began to dance on the altar. It was a solemn and elegant dance, and at the same time, it was also the highest level of the ritual. The 5 fairy concubines, who served the 5 fairy kings of fire, water, wind, earth, and saint respectively, were like goddesses. Their steps were light and graceful as they danced rhythmically. Surprisingly, Laicia was also present. However, compared to the easygoing demeanor she had displayed in front of Noah and the rest, Laicia, who was dancing on the altar, exuded a noble and elegant aura. Her expression was also rather pure. She was like a completely different person. There was not a single person in the hall who was unaffected by the solemn and beautiful dance. All of them focused their gazes on the altar as if they were intoxicated by it. Noah, Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice also gathered together, watching the sacrifice ceremony of the 5 elven concubines. As expected of a real fairy, Fianna praised. His mastery of the sacred music of rituals is indeed not something I can compare to. Is that so? Claire said. I don't think Fianna will lose to the fairy maiden when it comes to Kagura. After all, if your Highness' contract didn't have any problems, your Highness would have succeeded Lady Rubia's position 4 years ago, and not Lady Laicia. Alice said regretfully. Although this is a bit rude to Lady Laicia, your Highness didn't become the fairy maiden. It's really regrettable. I don't think it's that regrettable. Fianna said magnanimously. At least, in these 4 years, I've seen through many people's true colors. Moreover, if I had become the fairy maiden, then we wouldn't have been able to team up like this and win the elven sword dance ritual together. Well, that's true. Linley combed her light golden hair that reached her waist. If it weren't for Fianna's sacred music of rituals, we wouldn't have been able to win so many times and defeat so many opponents. Moreover, if Fianna became the fairy maiden, perhaps it wouldn't be a good thing. Claire's voice became low. No matter what the Elven King is already, the group of girls suddenly fell silent. Looking at the group of young ladies, Noah sighed inwardly and said, "Don't worry. Sure enough, you still can't accept the fact that the Elven King has gone mad." The girls still remained silent. Under such circumstances, Noah spoke indifferently. "It's all right, it would be strange if you accepted such a big thing so easily." Saying so, Noah turned his gaze to the group of girls. "Moreover, you should be nervous about the audience after the sacrificial ceremony, right?" Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice were immediately speechless. After the fairy maiden sacrificial ceremony, Noah's group would be led to the deepest part of the great sacrificial hall, where they would take a bath and change out of their attire. Then, the group would go to the great sacrificial hall and make a wish in front of the Elven King. Looking at the time, it would be less than 3 hours before they would have an audience with the Elven King. In other words, after 3 hours, the group of girls would personally witness the future of the world in the great sacrificial hall. Noah had said that at that time, he would make a move against the Elven Kings. If he succeeded, the Elven Kings would be released, and the world would be temporarily free from the threat. If he failed, the outcome would be eternal damnation. At that time, not only Noah, but perhaps the group of girls would also be implicated and lose their lives on the spot. Of course, with Iselia here, the group of girls would at least be able to survive. On the other hand, the group of young ladies wasn't afraid of death. It was just that when they thought about how the future of the human world and the elf world would be determined by the success of Noah's operation, the nervousness in their hearts couldn't be any greater. "It would be a lie to say that I'm not nervous." Alice was the first to break the silence and looked at Noah. "But I don't think what you're doing is wrong, so we'll support you. No matter what, we're teammates." Linley smiled sweetly. "In the academy, we obtained the qualifications to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival together. In the Elven Sword Dance Festival, we won together. If you plan to save the world, then we have no reason to stand by and do nothing. Although we can't be sure if we can help, we're all winners of the Elven Sword Dance Festival. If we don't meet the Elven King, the divine ceremonial courtyard will definitely be the first to make things difficult for us. They'll think that we're being disrespectful, right?" Viviana said sarcastically. "It's a pity that they still don't know that the person they're serving is no longer normal. If possible, I also hope to be able to witness it to the end." Claire's tone became resolute. "For years ago, when Sister barged into the great sacrificial hall, I want to personally confirm with my own eyes what exactly you saw." After saying that, the group of girls looked at each other, and shortly after, they all looked at Noah and said in unison, "So, we'll go with you." Hearing that, Noah's eyes flickered and he suddenly felt enlightened. Although these teammates of his were all pampered and noble young ladies, they weren't as weak as he had imagined. Because her sister betrayed the Elven King, Claire had been deprived of everything by her side. For 4 years, she had been troubled and looked at differently by others. She had already honed a strong heart. Linley looked like a pampered young lady, but not only was she gentle and virtuous, but she had also experienced the incident of her close relative being frozen by the mad Elven King. She also had a part of her perseverance. Like Claire, Viviana had been neglected by the royal family after being reduced to a lost elven concubine. She was looked at strangely by others, and her body and mind had been tempered. As for Alice, she didn't seem to have anything special about her, but she was also born in a family of warriors. Her respected sister had once been led astray, and it wasn't that she hadn't encountered adversity. Although these girls were incomparably pure in body and mind, it didn't mean that they would escape from suffering. In this regard, Noah could only smile. "Then, let's go together." Claire, Linley, Viviana, and Alice immediately smiled and nodded heavily. At this moment, on the altar, the elven concubine's voice resounded. "The sacrificial ceremony has ended. The winners, please come with us to take a bath and prepare to have an audience with the Elven King." The most crucial moment had finally arrived. Chapter 1843. This was an extremely grand yet somewhat dim hall. Pieces of elven ores hung on the walls of the hall, emitting a faint light. In the deepest part of the hall, there was a door. The door wasn't grand, but it was quite ancient and gave off a feeling of a long history. Duh! Noah stepped into the hall with powerful footsteps. After looking around, Noah's gaze fell on the door in the deepest part of the hall. Next to Noah, Claire, Lindley, Fianna, and Alice appeared one after another. Besides, just like Noah, the group of young ladies fixed their gazes on the ancient door almost immediately. Looking at the door that seemed to have been there since ancient times, Claire couldn't help but murmur. Is that the door to the Hall of True Sacrifice? At this moment, Noah and the others had changed their evening gowns into the uniforms of the Elven Academy. Meeting the Elven King was a matter of supreme honor. At least, it was definitely so for the people of this world. Originally, under such circumstances, Noah and the others wouldn't be overboard even if they wore extremely expensive and luxurious clothes. However, as the winners of the Elven Sword Dance Festival, the Elven envoys had to wear the competition's attire when meeting the Elven King. Therefore, Noah and the others were still wearing the Elven Academy's uniforms. The pure white uniforms seemed to reflect light under the illumination of the elven ores in the hall, appearing extremely conspicuous. However, Noah and the others' gazes were fixed on the ancient door and didn't move away. Because that was the door to the Hall of True Sacrifice where the Elven King resided. Just as Noah and the others were staring at the door, a series of orderly footsteps sounded from behind them, entering the ears of Noah and the others. The group immediately came back to their senses and turned their heads to look behind them. They saw 5 elven concubines wearing the highest ceremonial attire neatly lined up and walked in. That was not a phenomenon that had been rehearsed or deliberately produced. As elven concubines who had always practiced the divine music of ceremonies and performed the highest level of dance for the Elven King, the uniformity of their steps had long been engraved into the instincts of these girls. They could achieve such formality and pleasing to the eye without any deliberate effort. Naturally, Laicia was also present among the 5 elven maidens. In such a formal occasion, Rexia looked as solemn and holy as she did during the sacrificial ceremony. She exuded a noble and elegant temperament. Immediately after, the 5 fairy maidens bowed to Noah and his group, who were the winners. Then, as if she was the representative, Laicia took a step forward. Laicia's gaze slowly swept over Noah's group. She smiled and said, "Everyone, it's time to meet the Elf King. Have you all decided on your wishes?" Claire, Lindsley, Fianna, and Alice did not answer. Instead, they all focused their gazes on Noah. All of a sudden, the gazes of the elven concubines all gathered on Noah. Being stared at by 5 of the noblest fairy maidens in the continent, even the king of a country would be nervous, right? However, Noah acted as if he did not feel anything and nodded calmly. "We've decided on our wishes." That's right. They had decided on their wishes. From the beginning, Noah and his group only had one wish. Unfortunately, it was a wish that could not be revealed to anyone. Including Laicia. Including the fairy maidens. Claire, Lindsley, Fianna, and Alice's expressions were somewhat tense. The girls were probably worried that Laicia would ask Noah about the contents of his wishes. However, this worry was unnecessary. "Is that so?" Laicia nodded understandingly and then pointed to the door in the deepest part of the hall. "Then, everyone, please go through that door." Noah and his group once again turned their gazes to the door in the deepest part of the hall. Behind that door is a special place that is separated from the normal space. The front part is a corridor that extends endlessly. Through that corridor, you will reach the Hall of True Sacrifice and meet the Elf King. Laicia explained. Along the way, there will be forks in the corridor, but please do not step into them. In the past, several winners of the Fairy Sword Dance Festival stepped into the forks and lost their way. In the end, they disappeared in the cracks of the dimension and never appeared again. Everyone, please be careful. The expressions of the group of girls became even more tense. They probably did not expect that just an audience would be life-threatening. Only Noah slightly narrowed his eyes and nodded coldly. We understand. That's good. Lacia seemed to feel relieved from the bottom of her heart. She smiled again and then bowed to Noah and his group. Then, congratulations on getting your wish. Behind Lacia, the other 4 fairy concubines also bent down and bowed. Only then did Noah cast his gaze towards the group of girls and smiled slightly. All right, let's go. Claire, Linley, Fayanna, and Alice all nodded in agreement. At the next moment, under Noah's lead, the group of people walked toward the door in the deepest part of the hall with clear footsteps that echoed in the surroundings. Gotcha! Almost at the same time, the ancient door in the deepest part of the hall suddenly made a strange sound. Then, it gradually opened. The scene that appeared in front of Noah and his group was the same as what Lacia had described. It was a corridor that extended endlessly. There were indeed forks in the corridor. There were no walls around him. Instead, he was surrounded by a colorful space that was constantly twisting. At first glance, it looked like a corridor that was suspended in the colorful sky. It was quite beautiful. However, behind this magnificence, there was a hidden danger to life. If it was only Claire, Linley, Fayanna, and Alice, the 4 of them would definitely be nervous facing this corridor, right? However, Noah continued to walk in front as though he was not lost at all. His footsteps did not stop at all, and he continued to walk in the direction of the corridor. The back of the figure standing in front of the girls made them feel an uncontrollable courage. They all made up their minds and followed behind Noah. Thus, under the witness of the 5 fairy maidens, Noah and his group stepped into the infinite corridor. Rumble. With a rumble, the ancient door suddenly closed. The entire hall once again returned to an indescribable silence. In the infinite corridor that seemed to have no end, Noah and his group did not know how long they had walked. Although there were forks in the road, and some of them even appeared suddenly under the gaze of Noah and his group, Noah and his group never deviated from the direction and kept moving forward. In such a different space, even the sound of footsteps was not allowed, so Noah and his group walked in silence. Along the way, no one spoke. Instead, with a determined expression, under Noah's lead, they kept moving forward, forward, forward. At a certain moment, Noah stopped. At the same time, Claire, Linley, Fayanna, and Alice all stopped as well. This was because a huge door had suddenly appeared in front of everyone. It was as if a huge door had suddenly appeared and stood there. Gotcha! At the same time, the heavy door opened by itself, and the scene behind the door was imprinted into the eyes of the group. What appeared there was a huge staircase. The staircase extended upward, as if reaching into the sky, and connected to a high platform. On the high platform, there were 5 jade thrones. On the thrones, balls of shining light seemed to be suspended there, emitting a dazzling strong light. Looking at the balls of light sitting on the jade thrones, Claire, Linley, Fayanna, and Alice held their breaths. Noah's eyes also flickered, and as if talking to himself, he whispered. Is that the Fairy King? Yes. That was the Fairy King. He governed the elements of the world. He stood at the top of the world. He controlled the hegemony of the world. Like a god, he was revered by all the lives in the human world and the elemental world. Chapter 1844. Clank. Dazzling light shone from the balls of light hovering above the jade thrones, illuminating the entire hall of true sacrifice. That light was like the most dazzling color in the world, reverberating non-stop. How many people would believe such a dazzling light? In that dazzling light, there was endless darkness and endless madness hidden within. In the next second, a grand and solemn voice resounded in the entire hall of true sacrifice. Your sword dance is truly spectacular. We can grant your wish through a miracle to repay your sword dance. What request do you have for us? That voice seemed to be able to shake the space. The voice carried unparalleled godly might and reverberated in the huge hall of true sacrifice. The moment this voice sounded, Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice all trembled. It was as if an instinct from the deepest part of their bodies was glowing, making the girls all want to kneel down. In the past, the winners of the Elven Sword Dance Festival had to immediately kneel and declare their wish to the Elven King. Then, that wish would be fulfilled under the execution of miracle system. However, just as Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice were about to kneel, Noah lifted his foot and walked forward without any reason. Noah! Noah! The girls' hearts all trembled. Because Noah didn't kneel and walked forward as if ignoring the Elven King's voice, it was an absolute blasphemy. And the Elven King seemed to think so too. The entire space of the Hall of Sacrifice suddenly trembled. An extremely terrifying pressure filled the air, spreading in all directions. Among the balls of light hovering above the jade thrones, there were 3 balls of light that emitted a shocking godly might. That shocking pressure and divine might made the hearts of the 4 girls, Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice, shrink. Their charming faces turned deathly pale in an instant. Only Noah didn't seem to feel anything. His dark and deep eyes stared at the balls of light on the jade thrones, and fixed his gaze on the 3 balls of light that emitted a shocking pressure. Lotus said that the Holy Elven King's seat was empty. And the Water Elven King was already liberated. There were only 3 Elven Kings left. Then, it was clear which jade thrones the 3 Elven Kings were on. Looking at the source of the pressure, it was clear. Thus, a burst of violent godly might energy burst out from Noah's body like a burning flame. On the back of Noah's hand, the Elven seal emitted an unprecedentedly dazzling light, illuminating the entire space. Then, Noah began to chant. Cold Steel Queen, demon-slaying holy sword, turn into a sword of steel and bestow me with godly power. It was the incantation to summon the demon slayer. Divine starlight, lightning of salvation, wisdom of the goddess, indestructible steel, sword, appear in my hand. That was the incantation to summon the heavenly sword of salvation. Under the solemn and sacred incantation, a silver flash and a strong platinum light burst out from the elven seal on the back of Noah's hand, turning into a shiny silver holy sword and a dazzling platinum divine sword. Noah held them tightly in his hand. Shocking godly might energy poured into the holy sword and divine sword, making the silver light and platinum light look like 2 small suns, emitting extremely dazzling light. It was also at this moment that the pressure permeating the space suddenly stagnated. Bang! On the jade thrones, among the 3 balls of light emitting a shocking pressure, a burst of muffled explosions that made the space tremble. Then, a strange phenomenon occurred. An incomparably terrifying flame. A hair-raising hurricane. An extremely violent impact. They surged out from the 3 light clusters that sat on the jade throne. In an instant, they shook the entire space and swept out. Then, an extremely orderly voice rang out from the space. Die! As soon as the voice fell, terrifying flames, hair-raising hurricanes, and extremely violent impact surged down from the 3 jade thrones. Wherever the flames passed, the atmosphere was evaporated. Wherever the hurricanes passed, an ear-piercing sound echoed. Wherever the impact passed, the stairs trembled. The highest level of power of the 3 attributes of fire, wind, and earth turned into a torturous torment that took away a person's life. Like a monstrous wave of flames, hurricanes, and impact, it surged down from above. That power was definitely not something that a human could resist. Once touched, just like the heartless voice that echoed in the space a second ago, there was only one outcome. Death. Unfortunately, when faced with the shocking waves of fire, wind, and impact that were like monstrous waves, Noah's footsteps continued to move forward without stopping for a single moment. Only a voice slowly sounded from Noah's body. Avesta, activate. Dazzling starlight gradually emerged from Noah's body. At this moment, in the depths of Noah's heart, the cosmic sea, which no longer had the stone plate that represented authority and sovereignty, began to riot. Counteracted in turn. Simulated star map, another cosmology. The emerging starlight turned into an extremely terrifying power and shook Noah's body. Avesta. It could imitate the enemy's cosmology. Except for the human's cosmology, the power of other existences could be imitated and integrated into one's own simulated star map, another cosmology. This simulated star map, another cosmology, which could not be used in the world of fairy's tale, was now finally used by Noah. At this moment, under the power of the simulated star map, another cosmology, the power of the three elf kings of fire, wind, and earth all turned into waves of fluctuations and poured into Noah's body. Noah's aura suddenly rose steadily and climbed to the top, easily surpassing the elf kings. If it was said that the elven king was like a god, and his level in the box could be listed in the 4 digits, then with the power of the 3 elven kings, Noah's power had risen to an extremely terrifying level. Faintly, it had already reached the 3 digits, and the trend of breaking through the 4 digits. The astonishing power fluctuations caused the raging flames, wind, and impact from the jade throne to stagnate, as if they were stirred up by an invisible big hand. Bang! In the muffled sound of an explosion, Noah fiercely stomped on the ground, creating a shock wave. Under the situation where the ground was crushed, he turned into a streak of light and violently rushed up. In the next instant, the streak of light violently collided with the raging flames, wind, and impact waves. Poochie! Accompanied by the sound of tearing silk, the streak of light that soared into the sky was like a sharp knife, fiercely tearing apart the terrifying raging flames, the hair-raising wind, and the extremely violent impact waves formed by the 3 huge waves. Noah, who had turned into a streak of light, faced the raging flames, wind, and impact waves head-on. Finally, he broke through the 3 terrifying forces and violently shot to the front of the high platform. Absolute sword skill. Formbreaker Ardent Flower Spiral Sword Dance 72 consecutive strikes. That was the highest number of consecutive strikes that Noah could display at the moment. Wang! The Demon Slayer and Heavenly Sword elven magic equipment glowed brightly like never before. The Silver Holy Sword and the Platinum Heavenly Sword turned into a torrential storm of slashes. Like a continuous sword formation formed by streaks of sword light, it instantly enveloped the 3 balls of light that were emitting a terrifying aura. Poochie poochie poochie. The slashes that turned into sword light swept past the balls of light one by one, and in the midst of the tearing sound, the balls of light were slashed apart one by one. Bang! Suddenly, the balls of light exploded one after another. Chapter 1845. Bang! In an extremely uniform muffled explosion, the light balls sitting on the jade throne all exploded like fireworks, turning into bursts of light particles and dissipating in the air. Under the combo storm of Demon Slayer and Heavenly Sword of Salvation, even the elf kings were cut open alive. As the light balls exploded one by one, they disappeared one after another. Noah could clearly feel that his combo all hit the target, and each hit the elf kings hidden under the light balls. In other words, Noah had successfully liberated the remaining fire elf kings, wind elf kings, and earth elf kings. Almost at the same time, the powerful force surging in Noah's body began to dissipate little by little. The power from the 3 elf kings all dissipated one by one because the target of their imitation disappeared. The starlight surging on the surface of Noah's body dimmed little by little. In the depths of Noah's heart, the cosmic sea that represented another cosmology also calmed down little by little, restoring its original vastness and tranquility. This phenomenon told Noah. The elf kings were indeed all liberated. At that moment, Noah tapped the ground with the tip of his foot and retreated rapidly like a phantom. In an instant, he swept down the long flight of stairs and returned to the side of the group of girls. Only then did Claire, Linsley, Fianna, and Alice react. Success, success. Linsley couldn't help but cheer. The elf kings are all liberated. Claire, Linsley, and Alice also looked surprised and couldn't help but run toward Noah. Although it was extremely unbelievable that Noah actually defeated the joint attack of the three elf kings in an instant, at this moment, the joy of the result temporarily overshadowed the shock, causing the girls to cheer. However, Noah felt that something was wrong. Thus, Noah yelled at the group of girls without even turning his head. "Don't come over." Claire, Linsley, Fianna, and Alice suddenly stopped in their tracks, and the joy on their faces also froze. Noah raised his eyes and stared at the 5 empty jade thrones above. His dark and deep eyes gradually condensed. An indescribable heavy atmosphere began to spread in the air. The entire space returned to a state of silence, giving people an extremely oppressive feeling. Then, in Noah's heart, Ashtar and Athena's voices sounded at the same time. "Master! Be careful. Something is coming." The moment Ashtar and Athena's voices sounded, Noah's pupils also suddenly shrank. The next moment, the jade thrones in the deepest part of the hall of sacrifice suddenly trembled. Hum. Accompanied by trembling sounds that sounded like mournful wails, existences that did not belong to this world surged out from the jade thrones. Seeing this scene, Noah's eyes condensed again. Claire, Linsley, Fianna, and Alice looked at the things gushing out from the jade thrones. They all trembled, and their expressions changed drastically. What gushed out from the jade thrones was dense darkness. It didn't refer to the pure darkness, but it was like a turbid current that could engulf people. It emitted an ominous, evil, decaying, and terrifying aura. The darkness was like pitch-black magma, turning into turbid currents that continuously gushed out from the jade thrones, forming a wave that flowed down the stairs. That scene was like a pitch-black mudslide rushing down, making one's hair stand on end. Feeling the ominous, evil, decaying, terrifying, and even curse-like aura contained in the dark turbid current, Claire, Linsley, Fianna, and Alice's pretty faces turned pale, and their bodies uncontrollably retreated. What? What is that? Fianna couldn't help but let out a sorrowful cry. What? What a terrifying feeling. Linsley's voice also changed. Is that the otherworldly darkness? Alice clenched her trembling teeth. Sister. Sister, did you see something like this back then? Claire's whole body trembled. Even Noah couldn't help but click his tongue when he saw the dense darkness gushing out from the jade thrones like black mud. It's like the evils of this world. Noah had seen the same scene a long time ago. In the world of the Type Moon, during the Holy Grail War, all the evils of this world gushed out from the contaminated Holy Grail. It was exactly the same as the scene in front of him. However, all the evils of this world were just pure curses. If one was swallowed up, as long as one was a human, there was only one outcome. Death. However, the otherworldly darkness in front of him wouldn't curse people to death. Instead, it would cause elves to go crazy. Even the Elven King couldn't avoid it. He bitterly resisted, but in the end, he was swallowed up and completely lost to madness. However, unfortunately, this kind of power is useless against me. The otherworldly darkness was undoubtedly a kind of power. Since that was the case, that thing was destined to be useless against Noah. Without mentioning anything else, with Avesta's another cosmology, as long as Noah imitated the cosmology of the otherworldly darkness and used it as a mirror, he would be able to counteract that power. Since Noah didn't do anything and rushed into the otherworldly darkness, nothing would happen. Because Noah's physique was immune to all negative powers. The otherworldly darkness happened to be among them. At that moment, Noah raised his head and stared at the jade throne surging with dense darkness. Is that the door? The otherworldly darkness came from neither the human world nor the elemental elves' world. In that case, to come to the elemental elves' world from the otherworldly darkness, there must be a door that can be passed through. Just like how coming to the elemental elves' world from the human world required a door, the darkness from the otherworldly darkness also required a door. Now it seemed that the door of the otherworldly darkness was opened by those jade thrones, swallowing the elven king and making him go crazy. If the door was always open, even if the elven kings were liberated, they would still be swallowed by the otherworldly darkness in the future and fall into a state of madness, thus destroying the human world and the elven world. It was precisely because of this that Lubia was desperate and went to extremes, hoping to eliminate the elven kings from the root and eliminate the threat to the world. Frankly speaking, Noah also felt that it was not enough to just liberate the elven kings. If the otherworldly darkness was not eliminated from the root, it would still be a threat to the world. However, it was also impossible to eliminate the otherworldly darkness. Because no one knew how much darkness from the otherworldly darkness was left, and there was no guarantee that it would not continue to multiply and endlessly threaten the human world and the elemental elves' world. More importantly, there was no way to eliminate the darkness. After all, it was just pure power. So, Noah finally thought of a way. Back in the abandoned city, Noah told Lotus the method. Just destroy the door. With the power of the demon slayer and heavenly sword, it was not impossible to destroy the door that connected the two worlds. So, Noah's feet moved, and his body turned into an arrow that left the bowstring, shaking a whirlwind, like a gale, and rushed in the direction of the jade thrones. A faint sound of breaking air was heard. Noah's body flew in the direction of the jade thrones like a ghost. The dense darkness that surged out from the jade seat suddenly seemed to have been stimulated, and it began to fluctuate like boiling waves. Below, Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice, who saw Noah rush out with their own eyes, suddenly cried out in alarm. Be careful. They saw that the dark turbid flow turned into waves and surged up, rushing in the direction of Noah's back and covering the direction of Noah. Chapter 1846. Glug glug glug. The thick darkness that surged out from the jade seats on the high platform was like boiling water, making strange noises. Under such circumstances, the pitch-black turbid flow that flowed down the stairs also surged violently, making people's hearts palpitate. Noah, who was rushing in the direction of the jade seats, discovered the threat behind him before the group of girls cried out in alarm. The turbid flow that was like black magma turned into a boiling wave. Like a giant hand, it covered the direction of Noah, who was flying at high speed. In the next second, it was imprinted into Noah's eyes. An ominous, evil, decaying, and terrifying aura constantly emerged from the thick darkness. The intensity of the aura was so strong that even Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice could clearly feel it, not to mention Noah, who had superb senses. However, with a constitution that was not affected by any negative energy, Noah did not need to fear the thick darkness. However, if he was swallowed by the thick darkness, then even if Noah was not affected in any way, his movements would be obstructed and he would not be able to rush to the jade seats. Therefore, Noah could not ignore the threat behind him. Immediately, Noah poured divine power into the holy sword and divine blade in his hands. Absolute sword skill. Form 3 Shadow Moon Dance. In an instant, the silver holy sword and platinum divine blade turned into an arc, like moonlight, flashing through space. Poochie. With a ripping sound, the thick darkness that surged in Noah's direction like a huge wave was directly cut apart by the demon slayer and heavenly sword. Like a black ocean that was forcefully cut apart, it was cut in half at the waist. However, the thick darkness that was cut in half did not follow the gravity and smash into the pitch-black magma sea below. Instead, it directly floated there, trembling once again. With a twist, it turned into waves of pitch-black turbid flow. The turbid flow was like a huge shadow, mixed with ominous and evil fluctuations. It was like a black net that enveloped Noah's direction. Immediately, Noah's location was covered by a shadow. The thick darkness also fell from the sky, one by one fiercely covering Noah below. Absolute sword skill. Form 3 Shadow Moon Dance. Noah used the same trick again. His whole body that was suspended in the air started to spin like a top. The demon slayer and heavenly sword turned into sharp sword light, violently slashing apart. Poochie poochie poochie. The thick darkness that fell from the sky like a black net was suddenly ruthlessly cut apart by the moonlight like slashes, exploding like water splashes. However, the thick darkness was still not destroyed. This time, the splash-like darkness squirmed and turned into black lumps, shooting towards Noah like bullets. Noah, who had just cut apart the thick darkness, had no way to dodge. Bang 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 bang. Amidst a series of muffled sounds, Noah was sent flying backward as if he had been hit by a heavy rock. The friction between him and the air caused a sharp piercing sound to resound. Noah! Claire, Lindsley, Fianna, and Alice all cried out in alarm. No! We can't watch anymore. Lindsley bit her lip and shouted loudly. We have to help him. That's right. Alice agreed with Lindsley without hesitation. Noah is fighting for the world, for everyone. We can't just watch from the side. But what can we do? Fianna said anxiously and helplessly. We're not as powerful as Noah. Even if we help, we can't help. Even if that's the case, we can only go. Claire summoned her flame whip, her red eyes staring fixedly at the thick darkness. Noah is fighting. Even my sister wants to fight the otherworld darkness. I can't just watch. Lindsley and Alice both nodded repeatedly. Fianna clenched her teeth and nodded immediately. Okay. I'll give you my blessing. Claire, Lindsley, and Alice looked at each other and smiled. They all took out their elven equipment. However, just as the group of young ladies was about to rush forward, Noah's voice sounded again. Don't come over. Noah hovered in the air. He stared at the dense darkness that was still surging down from the jade throne and spoke in a deep voice. That darkness can make the Elven King go crazy, so it can make other elves go crazy. If you rashly barge in, you'll make all your contracted elves go crazy. Then it'll be terrible. In fact, if it wasn't for the continuous infusion of divine power into the demon slayer and the heavenly sword, as well as the fact that Ashtar and Athena's strength were equally extraordinary, Noah's contracted elves would have gone crazy after coming into contact with the darkness several times. Even so, Ashtar and Athena exhausted all their strength to resist the erosion of the otherworld darkness. They didn't even have time to say a word. And this was under the condition that Noah had been continuously providing divine power support. If Noah stopped the infusion of divine power, perhaps Ashtar and Athena wouldn't be able to resist the erosion of the otherworld darkness. Even Ashtar and Athena, who could rival the Elven King, were in such a state, let alone the contracted elves of Claire, Lindsley, Fianna, and Alice. Although the contracted elves of the girls were all high-ranked elves, they were still a distance away from the highest-ranked elves. Their strength hadn't even reached the demonic level and was far from the demon god level, let alone the mythical level. Ashtar and Athena's strength was above the mythical level, but they were still having a hard time resisting. Once elves who weren't even at the demonic level came into contact with the darkness, they would definitely go crazy. Therefore, Noah couldn't let the girls get involved. You don't have to interfere. It's not like I don't have a way. Noah said to the group of girls without turning his head as he stared at the thick darkness that was surging towards him. You just have to protect yourselves. If anything happens, immediately turn around and run. Do you understand? Claire, Lindsley, Fianna, and Alice's high spirits suddenly disappeared as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over them. However, Noah's words were reasonable and couldn't be refuted. At that moment, the girls could only grit their teeth and stand on the spot, their faces filled with unwillingness. Hovering in the air, Noah took a deep breath as he looked at the endless surge of otherworld darkness that was about to flow out of the stairs and touch the hall where the girls were. Aster. Athena. Let's decide the victor in one breath. Aster and Athena didn't say anything. However, the demon slayer and heavenly sword in Noah's hands blossomed with dazzling radiance, illuminating the entire hall of sacrifice. Feeling the divine power flowing from the demon slayer and heavenly sword, Noah's lips curled up. Immediately, Noah's figure shot up like a meteor, rushing toward the jade seats on the high platform. Wang! The dense darkness, which was like black lava, immediately began to rage. Just like before, it surged and set off waves after waves of black waves that surged towards Noah, who was flying over in an imposing manner. Looking at the thick darkness surging toward him like a monstrous wave, Noah didn't reduce his speed, but instead flew higher and higher. Avesta, activate. Counteracted in turn. Simulating another cosmology. Dazzling starlight burst out from Noah's body, mixed with silver and platinum flashes, shining brightly. Chapter 1847. Clang! Deep and dazzling starlight suddenly flashed in the space of the Hall of Sacrifice. For a moment, it dyed the incomparably thick darkness into a dazzling starlight. Noah's whole body seemed to be surrounded by stars, and his whole body was shrouded in a dazzling light like the Milky Way. That radiance even overshadowed the radiance of the demon slayer and the heavenly sword. Carrying the starlight all over his body, Noah was like a bolt of lightning. He did not dodge or evade. Instead, he directly charged toward the dense tide of darkness that was surging toward him. Wang! When Noah, who soared into the sky like a meteor, rushed straight into the thick darkness that surged over, the sea of darkness that flowed down the stairs like pitch-black magma suddenly trembled. Immediately, Claire, Lindley, Fianna, and Alice all saw it. Following Noah's rush, the thick darkness that forced Noah to retreat suddenly seemed to disappear and completely dissipated. Wang 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 wang. In the trembling sound, the thick darkness that came into contact with Noah's starlight was dispelled one by one. At this moment, the another cosmology called Avesta didn't superimpose the thick darkness power on Noah's body. Instead, it turned into a mirror and completely cancelled out the otherworldly darkness that came into contact with Noah. Under the power of the another cosmology of Avesta, Noah seemed to have entered a no-man's land. He rushed all the way and forcibly separated the surging waves of darkness. Chi! In the clear sound of breaking through the air, Noah, who was surrounded by dense starlight, rushed up and finally broke through the obstruction of the otherworldly darkness. He scuttled in front of the jade thrones. Wang 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 wang. The thick darkness that surged out from the jade throne seemed to have anticipated something and crazily trembled. Clang! In the next second, a dazzling light expanded from the demon slayer and heavenly sword. Noah poured all the divine power he could control into the demon slayer and heavenly sword. His whole body swelled with phosphorescent light. Absolute sword skill. Formbreaker Ardent Flower Spiral Sword Dance 72 consecutive slashes. The silver holy sword and platinum divine sword once again turned into flashes of light and intertwined to form a storm of sword strikes. It enveloped the jade thrones like a storm. The 72 consecutive slashes that were performed by the highest level elven magic device in 1,000th of a second turned into the most violent slashes and heavily fell on the jade thrones. The thick darkness that surged out from the jade throne suddenly stopped. Bang! A jade throne jade throne jade throne. Pang pang pang. As if triggering a chain reaction, the remaining 4 jade thrones exploded one after another. Buzz 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 buzz. The thick darkness that had just stopped suddenly seemed to have completely fallen into a frenzy and trembled violently. "Ah!" Claire, Linley, Frianna, and Alice cried out in surprise again. This was because the violent thick darkness surged into the air and turned into an extremely huge black arm. It set off a violent gust of wind. With an ominous, evil, decaying, and terrifying aura, it opened its palm in Noah's direction and fiercely grabbed him. Whoosh! The huge black arm even stirred up the turbulence in the atmosphere and turned the gust of wind into a storm. The space around the arm was crazily swirling. The momentum was extremely great. If he was hit by that attack, even if it was Noah, if he didn't activate another cosmology, he wouldn't have a good ending. However, at this moment, Noah didn't seem to notice the huge black arm behind him at all. He stared straight ahead. At this moment, Noah saw it. On the jade thrones where the elf kings originally sat, a vortex like a black hole was slowly rotating, emitting a terrifying aura. The thick darkness from the alien world all surged out from this black hole-like vortex. In other words, the black hole in front of him was the door that connected the alien world and the elemental elf world. Therefore, without any hesitation, Noah suddenly raised the heavenly sword of salvation and gathered a huge amount of divine power under his feet. Ultimate sword skill. Initial form purple lightning. The divine power gathered under Noah's feet was released and turned into a powerful thrust. It made Noah's body rush out like a gust of wind. The lightning-like thrust directly cut through the space, leaving a faint trace in the air. Immediately, the heavenly sword of salvation, which was shining with a dazzling platinum light, was like a thunderbolt, ruthlessly piercing into the black hole-like vortex. Poochie! A tearing sound, as if it had pierced through a human body, resounded. Whing! The thick darkness that surged out from the black hole-like vortex suddenly trembled. "Disappear for me!" Noah shouted in a low voice. Light of salvation. Full release. The platinum sword that pierced into the black hole-like vortex suddenly bloomed with a brilliant light. The light was like a tide, surging out and covering the black hole-like vortex, covering Noah's body, and at the same time, also covering the huge black hand that suddenly stretched out from behind Noah. In the end, the platinum light even covered the entire Hall of Sacrifice, bathing the Hall of Sacrifice in the light of the sword. The group of girls let out sorrowful cries one after another, and then they were also covered by the platinum light. The Hall of Sacrifice was located in the crevice of the dimension. It was a different space between the human world and the elemental world. If someone was in this different space, they would definitely discover it. In the Hall of Sacrifice, which was suspended in the air, flashes of light began to leak out. Immediately, under the power of the flashes, the Hall of Sacrifice began to collapse, disintegrate, and collapse. Pieces of debris and rubble fell to the ground due to gravity. Until they disappeared in the crevice of the dimension, completely disappearing. Not far from the floating island of the Holy Region, an airship was drifting aimlessly, slowly moving along with the wind. Above the airship, a magic square suddenly flashed without any warning, like a door that was forcefully opened. Aw, 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 aw. In the screams, Noah, Claire, Lindsay, Viviana, and Alice all appeared from the magic square and fell down. Because they were not very high from the airship, even Noah didn't have time to react, and they all fell onto the deck of the airship. Ah! Ouch! It hurts. The group of girls smashed their butts on the wooden deck, and it was so painful that they almost burst into tears. Only Noah adjusted his body in time and landed on the deck in a crouching position. Right at this moment, a rather cold voice sounded. It seems that the inspiration I received was correct. Hearing this voice, Noah and the others raised their heads subconsciously and looked forward. There, two people seemed to have been standing there since the beginning, and they were imprinted in everyone's eyes. Seeing these two people, Claire, Linley, Fianna, Alice, and the other girls all opened their eyes wide. Lady Leanna Subble. Lindsley and Alice exclaimed in surprise. However, Claire and Fianna were even more shocked. Looking at the other girl with long red hair, Viviana said in a trembling voice. Lady Rubia. Claire's expression changed drastically, and she murmured in a daze. Sister. Chapter 1848. The people who appeared in front of them were Lotus and Rubia. You. Noah said in surprise. Why are you here? Although there were many questions, this was the most important one. This was because Noah, Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice had no idea why they were suddenly teleported out of the Hall of Sacrifice, let alone the others. Judging from Rubia's words, this elf of calamity seemed to have been here all along, waiting for Noah and the others to appear. How did Rubia know that Noah and the others would appear here? It was as if she knew beforehand that Noah and the others would be teleported here. In fact, Rubia did know beforehand that Noah and the others would be teleported here. Although it's a bit ironic for me to say this, I'm still an elf who once served the Elf King, Rubia said calmly. After you entered the Hall of Sacrifice, I received some inspiration and knew that a door to the Hall of Sacrifice would open in this place, so I waited here. I was also found by Rubia after that, Lotus replied. Because she detected that a door to the Hall of Sacrifice was about to open, Rubia was worried that the otherworld darkness would flow out from there. In order to increase her combat power, Rubia took the initiative to find me. Not only Lotus, Rubia also found Lily and Maya. The two girls seemed to be on this airship as well. However, Lily was controlling the airship, and Maya seemed to have developed some fear of Noah ever since she was defeated by Noah in the Elven Sword Dance. She hid in the cabin, unwilling to come out. As for Sarah, the witch who attacked Lotus, she naturally couldn't stay here any longer. She had already fled back to the Alpha Empire. Therefore, there were only 4 people on this airship: Lotus, Rubia, Maya, and Lily. But Noah frowned slightly. Why were we suddenly teleported here? As soon as this voice fell, a young and clear voice followed. Because the Hall of Sacrifice collapsed at the last moment. If you continued to stay there, you would definitely fall into the crack of the dimension. That's why I opened the door and teleported all of you out. As this voice rang out, a petite figure slowly appeared in everyone's field of vision. Looking at the petite girl, Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice all knelt down. Even Lotus half knelt down. Lady Isalia. It was the Water Elf Queen, Isalia Shiva. It's really very lucky to be able to make it in time. Isalia first glanced at Rubia, who was staring at her, then she turned her head and looked at Noah. Noah Doria, thank you for freeing all the Elf Kings and destroying the door of the other world, preventing the Elf Kings from being devoured again. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that you've saved us, the human world, and the elf world. Hearing this, Rubia took a step forward. She didn't have the slightest respect for the Elf King and directly said. In other words, the Elf Kings have all been successfully freed, and even the door of the other world has been destroyed. That's right. Isalia nodded heavily. Although the Hall of Sacrifice was also destroyed, it couldn't be better to be able to solve the problem under such circumstances. Hearing this, the girls couldn't help but be overjoyed. Even Lotus showed a trace of joy. Only Rubia said with a cold attitude. Even if the door connecting the other world to the Hall of Sacrifice has been destroyed, there's no guarantee that there won't be a second door between the human world and the elf world, or even a third door. This way, it's only a temporary solution to the problem. No, you're wrong. Noah shook his head and said so. Even if there are still doors between the human world and the elf world, it's only a slight threat at best. It won't cause a world-class crisis, right? After all, the Elf Kings have been completely freed, and the door that directly leads to our location has been destroyed. Even if there are still doors in other places, if they can't reach us, then they won't be able to corrode our personality. Iselia added. Back then, the Otherworld's door opened in the Hall of Sacrifice without our Elf King noticing, and it appeared right under our jade throne. The darkness that came from the Otherworld directly swallowed us, who were defenseless, and polluted our minds. This time, I'll rebuild the Hall of Sacrifice and cut off the connection between the Hall of Sacrifice and other dimensions, completely eliminating the appearance of doors. Iselia said solemnly. This way, without the Elf King's permission, there won't be any entrance to the Hall of Sacrifice. In other words, the darkness of the other world could no longer threaten the Elf King. And as long as nothing happened to the Elf King, even if the darkness of the other world appeared again, it wouldn't be able to threaten the human world and the elf world. The elf kings who were on guard would never let the darkness of the other world take advantage of them again. This was what Iselia wanted to express. Unfortunately, only the elf king and the world will be saved. As long as the door to the other world still exists, the elves and humans may still be threatened. Rubia said coldly. My campaign is still not over. After leaving this sentence, Rubia turned around and walked towards the cabin without paying attention to the situation here. Sister. Claire couldn't help but call out softly. Rubia's footsteps paused without leaving a trace. Then, as if she didn't hear anything, she continued to walk forward. Looking at Rubia's back, Claire opened her mouth slightly, but in the end, she lowered her head and fell into silence. However, at this time, Fianna held Claire's hand. Let's go after her. Fianna smiled sweetly. I also have a lot of things that I want to ask Lady Rubia. After all, just like how Fianna and Lacia had a good relationship before Rubia's betrayal, Fianna also had a good relationship with Rubia. Presumably, this disappointed elf concubine had a lot to say to Rubia, right? Hearing Fianna's words, Claire plucked up her courage and nodded heavily. Then, Claire and Fianna both chased after Rubia and jogged over. Seeing this scene, everyone tacitly chose to stay where they were. At this time, Linley also plucked up her courage, stepped forward, and asked Iselia. Iselia, Sama, about my sister, don't worry, I didn't forget about this matter. Iselia looked at Linley. Now that the threat of the darkness of the other world no longer exists, we elf kings are also liberated. Once I return to my original body, I will naturally remove the curse I seal on your sister. I believe that soon, you should be able to see your sister again. Linley's pretty face was suddenly filled with surprise, and her eyes even turned slightly red. In response, Noah just smiled and patted Linley's shoulder. See? Didn't your wish come true? Linley nodded repeatedly, then turned around and hugged Noah. Noah was stunned. Alice's pretty face blushed. Linley just hugged Noah tightly and whispered. Thank you. Noah only reacted when he heard this sentence clearly. He couldn't help but laugh. He reached out and hugged Lynn Silei. Linley's pretty face also blushed. However, this rich young lady didn't leave Noah's side. Instead, she still hugged Noah tightly, as if she wanted to vent her inner feelings, and didn't let go for a long time. On the side, although Alice's face was red, she didn't yell like before. She probably understood Linley's current feelings. As for Lotus and Iselia, they merely watched this scene with protective gazes, and they couldn't help but smile. Under such a warm atmosphere, the airship floating in the air began to move, and slowly sailed into the distance. The night began to fade. Dawn gradually arrived. On the other side of the sky, the sun gradually rose from the direction of the airship. It was like the light of the future. Chapter 1849. On the deck that was gradually illuminated by the sunlight, Noah slowly walked out of the cabin and came to the bow of the ship. Hoo! A cold wind blew over, fluttering Noah's robe. Facing the cold wind, Noah stood at the bow of the airship and looked at the boundless sky. His dark and deep eyes flickered slightly. At this moment, footsteps sounded from behind Noah. Noah didn't turn around, as if he knew who it was. He continued to look into the distance. Under such circumstances, Lotus, who was wearing a witch costume, came to Noah's side and also looked into the distance. The man and woman standing side by side didn't speak immediately, as if they were enjoying the peace and quiet. They just looked into the distance. However, whether it was Noah or Lotus, they weren't looking at the scenery, but at the path they had to take next. After an unknown amount of time, Lotus spoke softly. "Just now, Lady Iselia entrusted me with a task." Hearing this, Noah wasn't surprised at all and directly said, "I can roughly guess what it is." "After all, it's not something difficult to guess." Lotus pursed her lips. "Lady Iselia wants me to search for the lost elf kings." Now, the elf kings were all liberated from the Hall of Sacrifice and regained their freedom. However, no one knew the whereabouts of the elf kings. At first, when Iselia was liberated by Lotus, the Water Elf King directly reincarnated in the underground maze of the abandoned city and lost her memory and power. Since that was the case, the three elven kings of fire, wind, and earth that were released by Noah should be the same as Iselia. At the cost of having their memories and powers sealed, they should have reincarnated into a corner of the human world and the elven world. Lady Iselia thinks that the most important thing is to find the three elf kings that were liberated. Lotus said. Otherwise, without the jurisdiction of the elf kings, whether it is the human world or the elf world, it may be affected. Even the elements may be completely chaotic, causing the death of many elves. The elements of the world were originally under the jurisdiction of the elf kings. Under the situation of losing so many elf kings, the elements flowing in the human world and the elf world may be out of control. This was not an alarmish thing. Moreover, with Lady Iselia's power, it is also troublesome to protect the human beings. Lotus continued. Therefore, it is absolutely necessary to find the elf kings. I know. Noah shrugged. Moreover, I know that with your character, I guess you've accepted it, right? There's no reason to refuse. Lotus's eyes slightly flickered. Although the power of the Dark Elf King resides in my body, I am not the Dark Elf King. I don't want to start a war with the 5 Elf Kings. Using this opportunity, I can also reach a compromise with the 5 Elf Kings. It sounds like something you would do. Noah smiled. However, you're right. Since you can completely control the power of the Dark Elf King, as long as you can build a good relationship with the 5 Elven Kings and convince them that you're no longer a threat, it's not impossible to reach a compromise. Because of this, I will continue to act together with Lubia, Mauya, and Lily in the human world and the elf world to find the whereabouts of the Elf Kings. Lotus said. Lubia has also agreed and said that she will help me. Did Lubia agree? Noah was surprised by this. I thought that girl didn't want to have anything to do with the Elf Kings. According to her, in order to determine whether there is a door between the human world and the elf world, it is necessary to travel around the world. In other words, her itinerary is exactly the same as mine, so it is not impossible to act together. Lotus's tone became a little serious. Moreover, Lubia is quite concerned about the Holy Elf King who was not on the Jade Throne in the beginning. She believes that we must not ignore the threat of this unknown Elf King and must find him. The Holy Elf King, whose whereabouts were unknown, was most likely corrupted by the otherworld darkness. Under such circumstances, where the crazy Elf King went and what he planned to do, it was believed that no one would not care. Since that was the case, finding the Holy Elf King became a top priority. Because of this, if it becomes a situation where we must fight, my combat power will be very precious. Since that is the case, it is not a bad thing to act together with me from the beginning. This should be Lubia's idea. Lotus glanced at Noah. Originally, Lubia seemed to want to invite you, but she probably guessed that you would refuse, so she gave up. I have done what I can do. Noah curled his lips and smiled. I'll leave the rest up to you. At first, when Noah came to this world, he only wanted to end things with Lotus and clean up the mess caused by the world fragment. However, it suddenly involved the otherworld darkness. Of course, Noah would not leave the people of this world in the lurch. Therefore, Noah won the Elven Sword Dance Festival and went to the Hall of True Sacrifice to free the Elf King, destroy the door of the otherworld, and eliminate the existence that was a threat to this world. In addition, the matter with Lotus had been resolved. Noah believed that even if he was not involved in the following matters, it would not matter. Even if the door still existed between the human realm and the elven realm, it was no longer a threat to the Elf King. Although the Holy Elf King's situation and whereabouts were still a mystery, with Lotus and Lubia, and the other Elf Kings as backup, it should be more than enough to deal with the Holy Elf King. Although nothing was absolute, Noah had already done what he could. After all, this world was not Noah's territory. It was impossible for Noah to protect the world forever. So, it was enough for him to do this. The following matters would be solved by the natives of this world. Both Lotus and Lubia had the ability to do so. Therefore, Noah had nothing to worry about. Asalia should have seen that I was planning to leave, so she did not ask me to find the Elf Kings, right? Noah sighed. Whether it's Asalia or Lubia, you can't underestimate them. I feel the same. Lotus could not help but smile, and then she was silent for a while. Are you really planning to leave? Do you think I'm lying? Noah said helplessly. I also have my own things to do. Really? Lotus was silent for a while, then she reached out and pressed her hand on her heart. Is it related to the thing in my heart? Something like that. Noah nodded. Just like you have the power of the Dark Elf King and have your own mission, I also have things to do. Before that, I can't have any regrets. That's true. Lotus sighed. Then, don't you plan to say goodbye to your companions? In the past few days, those girls have suffered enough. Now that the problems have been solved, and Claire and Linley's wishes have been fulfilled, if I tell them now that I plan to leave, won't they turn the world upside down? Noah spread out his hands. Let them continue to be happy. In other words, you plan to leave without saying goodbye. Lotus could not help but ask. Isn't that good? Can't you just help me pass on the message? Noah said irresponsibly. Help me tell those girls that I'm leaving temporarily. If fate wills it, we'll meet again. Also, tell Linley not to forget to arrange Myra's affairs and help me take care of her. Noah suddenly smiled. Tell Linley that when I come back, if I find out that Mira is not doing well, I'll make her butt bleed. After saying this, Noah laughed, and under Lotus's stunned gaze, he jumped out of the airship. Only then did Lotus react. She hurriedly stepped forward and watched Noah's figure gradually disappear into the sea of clouds. For a long time, she did not speak. After a while, Lotus said helplessly and amusedly. What an incredible person. Perhaps there will be all kinds of big and small problems in the future. However, there will always be someone who can solve these problems. Without Noah, the world is still spinning. Chapter 1850. Clang! In the pure white world, the feathers emitted a gentle light as usual, and they swam back and forth in the space like little birds. They looked like leaves drifting in the ocean, and they gave off a peaceful feeling. However, if it was someone who often saw the condition of these feathers, they would definitely notice it. As compared to before, the feathers that were floating in the pure white world were no longer as free as before. This was because the feathers only hovered at a low altitude, and they definitely wouldn't float higher. It was as if there was something extremely frightening above them, causing these feathers to carry a trace of fear, completely not daring to fly higher. However, that was to be expected. In this pure white world, high up in the sky, a fluorescent yet crystal-like curtain shrouded the area, separating the pure white world into two halves. Below was a place where feathers could float freely. Above them, however, was a hair-raising scene. There, red shadows that resembled the Grim Reaper were swimming back and forth like ghosts. There were so many of them that they were as densely packed as locusts, giving one goosebumps. Under such a situation, the feathers that represented the worlds below the crystal barrier dared not approach the sky at all. They could only hover at a low altitude like frightened little animals. Apart from that, there was another scene at a low altitude in the pure white world. An outline with 10 patterns connected to it, and a sun was imprinted in the center. There were 24 engravings on the sun, and it was a stone plate that was suspended in midair. Around the stone plate, there were strange and incomprehensible words that were rotating slowly. On both sides of the stone plate, there were two petite young ladies with their eyes closed. It was as if they were controlling a sparkling and translucent crystal, causing it to release bursts of white mist that fused into the stone plate bit by bit. Buzz, the sparkling and translucent crystal floated in front of the stone plate. As it spun, it released bursts of white mist that fused into the strange stone plate. The white mist first enveloped the strange stone plate, then slowly seeped into the stone plate as if it was pouring into it. As the white mist fused into the stone plate changed bit by bit. In terms of appearance, it was the change in color. The stone plate that was originally as dazzling as gold slowly turned into a pure white color under the fusion of the white mist. Although it wasn't as dazzling as before, it gave people a feeling of restraint. As for the strange and incomprehensible words that were revolving around the stone plate, they were also turning white bit by bit, as if they were gradually fusing with the surrounding pure white world, making it difficult for people to notice. However, this also proved that under the control of Gaia and Alea, Noah's power was indeed transforming bit by bit. Noah, who had returned to the world, looked at this scene. He then looked at the crystal barrier that was blocking the red shadows and couldn't help but sigh. It's still not good. Although there had been some progress compared to the beginning, in terms of Noah's authority and sovereignty, the pure white color only occupied less than a quarter of the area. Even the strange and incomprehensible words around the stone plate only had a quarter of it turned white, while the rest was still the original color. Seeing this, how could Noah not understand? His power, sovereignty, and ability had only reached a quarter of the upgrade. He estimated that when the stone plate and words turned white, Noah's power, sovereignty, and ability could be considered to have been successfully upgraded. At that time, Noah would have the power to rival the world level and become the strongest existence. Are there still more than 3/4? Noah's murmur made Gaia and Alea's eyelids tremble, and they immediately opened their eyes. Seeing this scene, Noah's spirit was shaken as he quickly went forward. You're awake. Hearing this, Gaia and Alea were slightly startled as they looked at each other. Following which, not mentioning Alea, Gaia burst out laughing. What do you mean we're awake? Little Noah. Gaia said in a mocking manner. We've been awake the whole time. Don't tell me you thought we were asleep. Ah. Noah awkwardly scratched his face. No, it's just that you've been doing your homework all this time. I thought you wouldn't open your eyes before completing the mission. We were just concentrating, Alea said expressionlessly. Although it's not difficult to help you upgrade your power, it's very difficult to control the center of the space between worlds to release the imaginative power. It requires all of your focus. After all, we're only the will of the planet and the will of humans. We can't represent the world itself, Gaia sighed. So, when we were chosen by the world as your guide, we were the ones who were extremely surprised. Moreover, we're only relying on the imaginative power to temporarily stay in the space between worlds. Originally, with our power and existence, we definitely wouldn't be able to enter here, Alea continued Gaia's words. To be able to control the center of the space between worlds like this is an extremely honorable thing for us. Is that so? Noah bitterly smiled. Then you've been concentrating on your homework. Don't you plan to rest? We have restraining powers. There's no such thing as fatigue, Gaia said, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Little Noah, you don't have to worry about us. Yes, Alea nodded. You should take advantage of the time when your power is still being upgraded to do what you want to do. From Gaia and Alea's words and sentences, Noah could hear a kind of doting and thinking for him. Perhaps, to be able to help Noah before the final battle, for these two restraining powers, would be a very happy thing. In the world of the shape moon, as the will of the planet and humans, Gaia and Alea had always considered the problem of maintaining their own existence and the survival of the planet and humans. However, ever since they were chosen to be Noah's guides, Gaia and Alea were destined to not be limited to a small planet and race. Just like how Noah's power was being upgraded, Gaia and Alea were also being upgraded. However, what these two restraining powers were upgrading wasn't their power but their horizons and knowledge, or even their existence itself. Gaia and Alea should be very happy about this change, right? As for Noah, Gaia and Alea were treating him like family. Compared to when he was just the will of the planet and humans, their feelings were much richer. Therefore, Noah held a grateful attitude and nodded. I know. I will try my best not to leave behind any regrets. That's good. Gaia and Alea's expressions relaxed a little. Oh right. Gaia seemed to have suddenly thought of something. She flipped her hand and a piece of jade appeared in her small palm. She tossed it to Noah. This is for you. Noah was startled at first and subconsciously received the jade. Then, he reacted and spoke in surprise. What's this? Have you forgotten that we removed the souls of a dragon and a wolf from your body? Gaia pointed at the jade in Noah's hand. The dragon's soul was stored in this jade and has been sleeping ever since. I reckon that it's about time, so I'm giving it to you. By the way, Drake's soul has been with you ever since, Noah hurriedly said as he recalled this matter. What about Bio? We let that fantasy breed return to its original world and timeline so that it can accompany your former companions, Alea replied. Fantasy breeds are existences that materialize souls, so even if they only have souls, they could transform into a form and move freely. There won't be a problem. But this dragon is a different story. Gaia shrugged. This dragon can't transform into a form freely, so I stored it in this jade and let it sleep. Now, you can deal with it yourself. Noah tightened his grip on the jade and nodded. Chapter 1851. This was an unimaginable world. The sky was not blue in color, but it was as clear as a lake. The wind whistled past. It was neither too cold nor too hot. Although there was some humidity, it did not make people feel uncomfortable. The ground was filled with all kinds of colors. There were green grasslands. There were brown mountains. There was red soil. There were golden fields. Buildings were located in all directions. Among them, there were skyscrapers that resembled modern human society, but there were also castles and halls that resembled those of the Middle Ages. Mixed together, it did not make people feel chaotic. Instead, there was an indescribable sense of beauty. The most unbelievable thing was that there was no ocean in this boundless world. On Earth, the ocean took up almost 70% of the area. If this world was as vast as Earth, but there was no ocean, then one could imagine how vast the land here was. All these phenomena added together showed how unbelievable this world was. And this was indeed not the human world. This was the underworld. It was occupied by demons and fallen angels. There were powerful individuals everywhere in the underworld. It was said that there was a Hades below the underworld. That was where the souls of the dead returned to. In other words, this world could also be called hell. The demons and fallen angels occupied the left and right sides of the underworld. They had been fighting with each other all year round. In addition to the angels who lived in the heaven realm, the three major forces had been fighting since ancient times. It was only after the gods and demons died that the war stopped. Of course, that was already in the past. Not long ago, the angels, demons, and fallen angels signed a peace agreement under the witness of a famous god slayer. In other words, the angels, demons, and fallen angels had begun to reconcile. Not only did they stop fighting, but they also cooperated and shared each other's technology and information. Under such circumstances, it was conceivable that the three major forces, which had been exhausted by the existence of war, would enter a period of rapid development. However, this was still not enough. After all, we have lost the gods and demons. As a mythological system, we are on the verge of collapse. People from other mythological systems are likely to target us. Therefore, it is necessary to negotiate with other forces. In the Demon King's territory of the underworld demons, in a vast conference room in a magnificent building, Asashel held a glass of red wine in his hand as he sat on the sofa. He spoke in a tone that sounded both casual and solemn. At present, we have contacted Norse mythology first. Next, we need to find an opportunity to sit down and talk with Greek mythology, Indian mythology, Egyptian mythology, and Celtic mythology. It is troublesome just thinking about it. Although he looked very frivolous, this middle-aged man with a bad feeling was the governor of the fallen angels. He had the highest level of fallen angels with 12 wings. In terms of status, Asashel was equivalent to the emperor of the fallen angels. In terms of strength, Asashel was not the least bit weaker than the Demon King. Therefore, no matter how frivolous the words coming out of Asashel's mouth sounded, they couldn't just ignore them. At least, Sarsex, who was present, nodded. The status of this handsome man with red hair was not lower than that of the governor of the fallen angels. As for why, the reason was very simple. Sarsex, full name Sarsex Lucifer, was the current Lucifer of the 4 demon kings and was recognized as the most powerful one among the demon kings. Needless to say, the status of the Demon King was obvious. In terms of strength, perhaps very few people knew that Sarsex had long surpassed the category of the Demon King and reached the point where he could even kill gods. However, at that very moment, the terrifying existence said with a gentle expression, "Although it is troublesome, we have to talk about it. We have too many things that will be targeted by other mythological forces." Although demons, angels, and fallen angels were called the 3 major forces, they were only 3 major forces of a mythological system. The demons, angels, and fallen angels here all came from the Bible. Therefore, when the 3 major forces were combined, it was considered a complete mythological force. It was a pity that this mythological force had lost its only god. Even the 4 demon kings had all died. More than half of the high-level cadres of the fallen angels had died and could be said to be on the verge of death. In this way, other mythological forces would naturally target them. The strong preyed on the weak. The decline of a mythological force would attract the covetous eyes of other mythological forces. This was a matter of course. Because, no matter which mythological force it was, they needed to fight for territory. Of course, the territory here did not refer to the territory of every mythological force, but the territory of the human world. Humans were indispensable to every mythological force. The most basic need, faith. That was a need that every mythological force could not ignore. Demons, angels, and fallen angels also had territories with deep faith in the human world. Now that gods and demon kings were no longer around, other mythological forces coveted the faith occupied by demons, angels, and fallen angels. It was only natural for them to be restless. The first 4 demon kings died in the war. This is news that everyone knows. Sarsex sighed. However, the news of God's death has not been leaked so far. That's why the other mythological forces dare not make a move on us easily. After all, although there is only one God in our mythology, the God of the Bible is indeed very impressive. He alone occupies the position of a mythological god. Naturally, other forces would not dare to act rashly. Asashel swirled the red wine in his glass. Now, the God of the Bible is dead. If you demons had not elected new demon kings, and each of them is not weaker than the first 4 demon kings, and that guy Michael is quite capable and can deal with the gods of the other mythological forces, I'm afraid that some guys would not be able to hold themselves back and would have made a move on us long ago. However, the most important thing is that we have a god slayer on our side. Sarsex suddenly smiled. The news of God's death has been known by the other forces, but the news of a god slayer on our side is also spread at the same time. There should be many mythological forces who are hesitant about this, right? In addition, this god slayer is the current Red Dragon Emperor. Such a joking combination must have made those gods who are afraid of death worry, right? Asashel laughed as well. Well, there are people who scoff at the so-called God Slayer, but it's better to be safe than sorry. Which god is worried that if they die, the entire mythological system will be affected, so none of them dare to come over. Thanks to this, we have reached an agreement with the Nordic side. Sarsex raised his glass of red wine. This is already quite a big gain. Although the other side also came for the God Slayer at the beginning. Asashel shrugged. We just seized this opportunity to talk to Odin. I didn't expect it to really work out. Unfortunately, a lot of things happened in the middle. Sarsex sighed. In short, if we can reach an agreement with the Nordic side, then the other mythological forces will not dare to really make a move on us. There is no way to put an end to some small troubles. Asashel narrowed his eyes. I'm not afraid of them coming openly, but I'm afraid of them coming in the dark. This sentence, coming from you, the governor of the fallen angels, is really persuasive. Sarsex smiled bitterly. But you're right, we still can't relax. Michael is already in contact with the gods in Greece, right? Asashel nodded. We'll leave the Greek side to Michael for the time being, and we'll strengthen our defenses here for the time being. Sarsex nodded as well. At this moment, a small magic array flashed in front of Sarsex. It was a magic array for communication. Sarsex leaned over and listened for a while. After a while, a look of joy appeared on his face. Noah is back. Hearing this, Asashel's eyes lit up as well. That guy has disappeared for a whole month. Is he finally willing to come back? Chapter 1852. The Underworld, the Jemengli Domain. As a pure-blooded demon family that had been passed down since ancient times, the Jemengli family had a very vast territory. There was no ocean in the underworld, and the number of demons and fallen angels was much less than that of humans. The great wars since ancient times had caused many pure-blooded demons and fallen angels to die, causing the value of land in the underworld to not be as high as in the human world. The territory allocated to the pure-blooded demon families was surprisingly large. Other things aside, the territory of the Jemengli family was as large as an island nation. In this situation, the head of the Jemengli family could be called the king of a country in the human world. However, at this moment, in the main residence of the Jemengli family, who was like a king of a country, was passionately chatting with Noah, who was sitting across from him, in a guest hall. I heard that you've been training for the past month. There aren't many young demons as hardworking as you. Not to mention young demons, even those who have lived for a long time don't have such a concept. If possible, I really hope that other demons can learn from you. Hearing this, Noah could only smile sheepishly. The heavens took pity on him. In the past month, Noah had not been training, but traveling in various worlds. However, in other worlds, Noah had also been training, so it could not be said that it was wrong. The reason why the head of the Jemengli family said this was because Noah had found an excuse before leaving this world. At that time, Noah had just fought with Orpheus, and he immediately expressed that he wanted to leave. The battle between Noah and Orpheus was only known to the 4 demon kings, Athaziel, Laius, and their dependents. Therefore, when he told Laius and the others that he would be leaving for a period of time, as insiders, Laius and the others thought that Noah had discovered his shortcomings in the battle with Orpheus and was preparing to train. At that time, Noah did not explain in particular, so everyone thought that Noah really intended to train for a period of time. Although Jemengli didn't know about the battle between Noah and Orpheus, he knew that Noah was preparing to cultivate in the netherworld for a period of time, which was why he said that. Syzax has been talking to me about you all this time. He said that the reason why the other mythological system factions haven't done anything to us after learning that the gods here are no longer around is largely because of you, Jemengli said with a sigh. It's such a blessing for my Laius to be your fiancé. So, in this world, Noah and Laius were engaged. Although Noah and Laius did not deny the engagement to prevent their family members from marrying into other pure-blood demon families on their own accord, it was more of an act than anything else. Still, the Gimli family seemed to be looking forward to the engagement. Noah felt that if this continued, the fake would become real. He felt that it was about time, so he spoke to Jemengli. Well, actually, Laius and I, just as Noah was about to confess everything, the door to the living room opened. Oh. Azashel looked at Noah with a wicked smile on his face. You're really back. Father. Syzax first greeted Jemengli before turning his gaze to Noah with a smile. You're finally back. If you hadn't come back, Laius might have sent someone to look for you. I've just returned too. Noah spread his hands, his attitude towards Syzax and Azashel became casual. Laius should have returned to the human world, right? After all, the summer vacation ended after you left. She still has to go to school, so she naturally has to go back to school. Syzax chattered as he approached. Speaking of which, you're still a teacher in Laius' school. The summer vacation is over, don't you have to report? I'm just a little infirmary teacher. I don't have any actual classes to attend, so it's fine. Noah pursed his lips. Of course, I've also asked Laius to help me apply for leave. It's fine. Being a teacher is so leisurely. I want to try being a teacher too. Azashel sat opposite Noah and complained. Well, you're so leisurely, we've been so busy. Is that so? Noah immediately asked. Did anything special happen during this time? Something big did happen, Syzax said as he sat down as well. It has something to do with you too. How about you listen in? It has something to do with me too. Noah raised his eyebrows slightly. Seeing that Noah, Syzax, and Azashel were about to talk about something important, Jemengli stood up. In that case, I won't disturb you from talking about business. Please make yourselves at home. With that, Jemengli immediately retreated. Then, Syzax and Azashel explained to Noah an important thing that had happened in the past month. During Noah's temporary absence for a month, different things did happen, big and small. And among these things, the most noteworthy one was the visit of the Norse main god, Odin. After the peace agreement was concluded, demons, angels, and fallen angels began to contact the forces of other mythological systems. The main purpose was naturally to achieve true peace so that the existences of the various mythological systems would no longer fight. However, no matter which mythological force it was not so easy to conclude an agreement. In order to compete for faith and resources, each mythological system was quite exclusive. Therefore, when they first came into contact with the forces of other mythological systems, they hit a wall everywhere. The only exception was Norse mythology. As the main god of Norse mythology, Odin did not refuse the contact here. Instead, he took the initiative to propose a visit here. According to Asashel, in the beginning, Odin's visit was only for Noah, the god slayer. For those who were called gods, they really had to pay attention to the existence that could kill gods. Odin's visit was probably to confirm whether Noah, the god slayer, really existed. Unfortunately, at that time, Noah had already left. But Odin's visit also gave Syzax and Asashel a chance. In the end, under the persuasion of Syzax and Asashel, Odin finally agreed to conclude a peace agreement. However, just like when demons, angels, and fallen angels reached a peace agreement with each other, there were also many people who opposed it internally. In Norse, gods who refused to contact the other mythological forces also existed. Among them, there was even a god who launched a large-scale attack in order to destroy the peace agreement. Loki. The evil god of Norse mythology who was Odin's sworn brother. This evil god was a member of the extremely exclusive gods. For Odin, who took the initiative to contact the other mythological forces and even intended to conclude a peace agreement, Loki was extremely dissatisfied and even had the intention to kill. He actually brought Fenrir and a large number of legendary monsters that he had created and launched a large-scale attack. Fenrir. Noah said in surprise. Don't tell me you're referring to the Fenrir with the title of the god slayer wolf. The Fenrir here was not Linley's magic ice elf, but the most famous magical beast in Norse mythology. Legend had it that when it opened its mouth, its upper jaw and lower jaw could hold up heaven and earth. Legend had it that because its personality was too fierce, it was imprisoned by the dwarves. Legend had it that it escaped at the end of the world and swallowed the sun and the main god Odin in one bite. Legend had it that it was the culprit that caused Norse's greatest tragedy, the twilight of the gods. Its father was the evil god Loki. However, its power surpassed that of the gods, including Loki. If one was hit by its sharp teeth and claws, even a god would not be able to avoid death. Therefore, it was also known as the god slayer wolf. In the box, Fenrir was one of the final trials of humans. In this world, Fenrir was ranked in the top 10 of the world's top powerhouses. Such an existence, together with a god and a large number of legendary monsters, launched a large-scale attack. The disaster caused by that was not a joke, right? Then how did you repel Fenrir? Noah looked at Syzax. Only you and Ichuke can repel Fenrir, right? But the person who did it was not me. Syzax reported a name that shocked Noah. It was Orpheus who repelled Fenrir. Chapter 1853. Unlike before, Noah now knew what it meant to be in the top 10 of the world's strongest. It did not refer to the ranking of all the existences in a single mythical force, but it was a ranking that took into account all the strong existences in the current world, including the gods of various mythical systems. To be able to be in the top 10 meant that one could be among the strongest. At present, the top 10 of the world's strongest were the following figures. The infinite dragon god, Orpheus. The god of destruction, Shiva of the three Hindu gods. The god of protection, Vishnu of the three Hindu gods. The god of creation, Brahma of the three Hindu gods. The celestial emperor of Mount Meru, Indra. The thunder god in Norse mythology, Thor. The magic wolf in Norse mythology, Fenrir. The god of the underworld in Greek mythology, Hades. The sun god in Egyptian mythology, Aten. The god of light in Celtic mythology, Ruger. The top 10 were the 10 strongest existences in all the mythical forces. In this ranking, except for Orpheus who was recognized as the strongest and ranked first, the rest were not ranked first. The difference in strength was not big enough to clearly distinguish the ranking. Because of this, in addition to the top 10 existences, there were some existences who had the ability to squeeze into this ranking. For example, before being sealed, the two heavenly dragons were at this level. Another example was that as a surpasser, Syzax and Ichuka also had the ability to enter. And Fenrir was among them. Therefore, in Noah's opinion, if Loki had really brought Fenrir, the only ones who could fight Fenrir were Syzax and Ichuka. However, Noah never thought that it would be Orpheus who made the move. I'm afraid that no one thought that Orpheus would suddenly appear and make a move. Asashel seemed to recall the scene at that time and could not help but be speechless. That's also Wally's fault, right? Wally. Noah frowned. Wally also appeared. He had the blood of the former demon king Lucifer in him, but also half-human blood, so he was chosen by the god of annihilation and was known as the strongest white dragon emperor in history, Wally Lucifer. That fellow had actually appeared as well. The white dragon emperor with the bloodline of the previous Lucifer seems to be eyeing Fenrir's fangs, Syzax said. Joining such a dangerous terrorist organization like the Disaster Group and becoming enemies with various mythical forces, even if he is known as the strongest white dragon emperor in history, with Wally Lucifer's ability, it is still not enough to deal with the various forces, so he gathered a group of teammates around him. Wally wants Fenrir to be the trump card of his team, right? Asashel said helplessly. Although that brat longs for battle, it's not that he doesn't want to live anymore. With Fenrir's fangs that can actually kill gods, he would even dare to challenge the gods of various mythological powers, right? Orpheus seems to have come with Wally. Syzax was equally helpless. In the beginning, Wally seemed to want to use his own strength to capture Fenrir, but in the end, Orpheus still took action. Since Orpheus took action, the result was needless to say. Although Fenrir was one of the top 10 powerhouses, as mentioned before, Orpheus was an existence that could be said to be infinite, and his own strength had already reached a terrifying level. Even if the rest of the top powerhouses were to join forces, they would still not be a match for Orpheus. This may be a little vague, but with Box Ting's level, the gap was more clear. From Noah's point of view, the top 10 powerhouses in the world should all have 4 digits. Not to mention others, Syzax and Ichuka, who could be ranked among the top powerhouses, had 4 digits, and they were more powerful existences among the 4 digits. The rest of the top powerhouses naturally had 4 digits as well. Orpheus, on the other hand, had 3 digits. Therefore, Orpheus was indisputably the strongest. In the beginning, even Noah, who had mastered the ability to use 2 clones at the same time, was defeated after facing Orpheus. He was on the verge of death and was almost killed. Against such an existence, there was only one result for Fenrir. A wolf that could slay a god was almost killed by Orpheus, Asashel lamented. You definitely can't imagine the scene at that time. My eyeballs almost fell out when I saw it. Orpheus lives up to his reputation as the most powerful dragon god, an existence that even gods and demon kings fear. Syzax's expression turned solemn. With such an existence joining the group of disasters, the threat was really terrifying. In the end, Wally successfully got Fenrir. Asashel spread his hands. And we took advantage of the time when Loki was scared witless by Orpheus to take down that evil god. Then, Odin would bring him back to Northern Europe to punish him. At this point, the peace talks with Northern Europe were finalized. I didn't expect that to happen. Noah frowned. And, Wally actually got Fenrir. Wouldn't that be terrible? It'll definitely be bad. After all, it's a legendary monster that can even kill a god, Asashel said casually. But, even if he got Fenrir, it's impossible for him to completely control that power. So, we guessed that even if Wally could control Fenrir, it would cause Fenrir's power to be greatly reduced, Syzax said. Although the wolf that can cause harm to gods is still a threat, it's not as scary as Fenrir at its peak. If you were there at that time, it would be interesting to see. Asashel smiled slyly. The god slayer subdued the wolf. That would definitely scare the guys from the other mythical forces half to death, right? Unfortunately, I'm not interested in that wolf. Noah pursed his lips and then thought of a problem. By the way, why do you say that this has something to do with me? Is it because Odin came for me? Syzax and Asashel looked at each other. Although Wally is a member of the group of disasters, it's impossible for him to take the leader with him, right? Asashel said. According to that guy, the reason why Orpheus followed him was entirely because Orpheus thought that if he acted with Wally, there was a high chance that he could cross paths with you. After all, you are the Red Dragon Emperor, and Wally is the White Dragon Emperor. The two dragons have been enemies since ancient times. That kind of relationship is like fate. It's absolutely impossible for you not to meet. Syzax looked at Noah. And Orpheus seems to be very interested in you, so he followed Wally. He only attacked Fenrir because it was convenient. That's what the White Dragon Emperor told us. Noah was speechless for a moment. It turned out that the reason why the top 10 powerhouses in the world had such a tragedy was all because of him. Moreover, it was in the form of being easily dealt with. In this world, Orpheus was the only one who could easily deal with an existence that was one of the more powerful ones among the four-digit figures. However, Noah heard that in this world, there was actually an existence as powerful as Orpheus, or even more powerful than him. However, it was basically impossible for that existence to appear in this world. It did not even belong to this world, so Orpheus was the strongest. If it weren't for Orpheus, to deal with Fenrir, I guess Syzax and Ichuka would have to take action. However, by the time Syzax and Ichuka arrived, we would have been long dead. Asashel scratched his cheek. By the way, at that time, except for a few higher-ups of the fallen angels, including me, who fought against Loki and Fenrir, the rest were only Lea's and her family. Lea's? Noah was shocked. Let them fight against the god and the god-slaying wolf. Are you crazy? It can't be helped. No one thought that the Lord Evil God would descend with the famous god-slaying wolf. Asashel spread his hands. In addition, Lea's family has been frequently fighting against the terrorists of the Calamity Squad during this period of time. The pressure is probably not small. So, it's better for you to hurry back to your school and take charge. Noah sighed. He had encountered troubled times.